Devour. Criminal Defense Attorney Romance. Complete Series. Written by Lucia Jordan. Narrated by Layla Vassal. Book 1. Maggie shivered with pleasure as soft kisses traveled from her knee, slowly up her inner thigh. She squirmed, her hands twisting the royal blue satin sheets. The teasing breath on her thighs caused her hips to rise slightly, eagerly awaiting something, anything. Glancing down at Connor's blonde head hovering over her nakedness, Maggie felt the dampness between her legs grow. She knew that begging and pleading wouldn't convince him to kiss her there, the one spot that would make her come apart. Rational thought left her mind as he blew lightly on her overheated flesh. His warm, calloused hands pushed her thighs up and apart, leaving her open to his gaze. Maggie closed her eyes, focused solely on the tingling sensations traveling through her oversexed body. She was still reeling from the amazing orgasm Connor had treated her to the moment she walked through the door. That had only been an hour ago. Round 2 was going slower, much slower. Her nipples hardened, aching to be touched and licked as much as her soaking wet pussy. Maggie released the sheets and grabbed her breasts. Every man she had ever slept with had told her that a handful was plenty. Rubbing and pulling at her taut nipples, she was eagerly ready to agree with them. A moan escaped her lips. Her legs were spread as far as possible to accommodate Connor's large bodybuilder form. A single finger slid over her wet opening, causing her to moan louder. He pulled the outer lips apart, inspecting the tender, swollen flesh, as if he hadn't seen her over 100 times over the last year. Maggie squirmed, trying to get closer to his touch. She was pretty sure a whimper escaped her lips at some point. One finger slid inside, then 2. They both stroked the inside of her, begging her to come. The moment his tongue touched her clit, Maggie shattered into a million pieces. Her convulsing body did nothing to stop Connor from sucking and licking her totally exposed clit. His fingers worked their way in and out, faster and faster. Oh, God, yes! Her body had a mind of its own. Her hands left her breasts and grabbed onto Connor's head, pushing him closer, smothering him. After another mind-numbing orgasm began, Connor positioned his hips between her thighs, grabbed her wrists, effectively pinning her against him, and slid inside her. God, he always fit so tight. Even when she was wet, he stretched her. Maggie, you make me crazy. His impassioned growl was more evidence of his restraint. Her mind was on nothing more than the new wave of ecstasy with him inside her. Ride me hard. Make me come again. Connor flashed her a passion-glazed stare. Maggie knew he was quickly losing control, and she knew just how to drive him over that edge, the one where nothing but release mattered. She surged her hips upwards, tightened her muscles around the manhood buried deep inside her. A loud groan erupted over her. The next moment, he was sliding in and out. There was nothing playful or teasing left. Maggie closed her eyes as he rammed into her harder and harder, his pelvic bone hitting her clit every time. Someone was screaming with pleasure, only she wasn't sure if it was her or Connor. She came first, her body tightening, trying to hold on to each moment as Connor continued moving inside her. A second later, he was coming inside her, every muscle tensed. She was pretty sure he even stopped breathing for a minute. Without a word, Connor rolled off and plopped onto the other side of the bed. Maggie still hadn't quite figured out how they managed to only have sex on one side of the bed when they started in the middle. Maybe he worked it out so that he actually maneuvered my body over without me realizing it. Maggie closed her eyes, relishing every aftershock that sent tremors through her body. Oh, who cares how he does it? She felt the bed shift as Connor got up, and the familiar creak of floorboards moments before the squeak of the hinges on the bathroom door. Good old Connor. No messy snuggling. Just get up and clean yourself off. She couldn't help but smile at the simplicity of it all. And now I'm going to ruin it all. I should have just told him over the phone. I knew he'd end up in bed. We always end up in bed. Okay, so maybe there isn't always a bed involved. After almost a year, I should know better than to think we would be in the same room with each other without having sex. At least he didn't say I love you this time. That was seriously awkward. So maybe this letter thing is a good thing. Connor's getting way too attached. Well, hell. Maggie took a deep breath. I got a lead on my parents' murder. Her sentence hung in the air until she was pretty sure you could see the tension. I thought you said it was a cold case. Connor strode across the room, allowing her a glimpse at his well-formed, tan physique. Even when he was mad, he was gorgeous. And she knew he was mad before he started slamming drawers and pulling on his blue gym shorts. Stretching her limbs out to ensure they'd all still worked, Maggie didn't try to hide the excitement in her voice. I received a letter last week that leads me to believe that their killer is back in Stony Brook. Connor turned towards her with his hands on his slim hips. His eyebrows were drawn together in the same way they always did when he was pissed. Maggie fought the urge to smile. Her fingers itched to run over that washboard stomach. She knew that would wipe the scowl off his face. His scowl disappeared only to be replaced with disgust that instantly iced her sex drive. Please do not tell me that you're going to Stony Brook to chase down someone who may or may not be the person that killed your parents. Your life is here in New York. The last part had nearly been a yell. Connor stopped and took a deep breath. I understand it was a tragic event in your life, but Maggie, you were a year old when it happened. It's been almost 30 years. When does it stop? When do you get to live your life? You have to let go and move on. And there it was. She knew it was coming. Sliding off the bed, Maggie ignored the chill of the apartment's hardwood floor. Silently counting to 10 in order to regain her calm, she began retrieving her underwear and clothing from around the 12 by 12 room. Her bra was draped over the side table lamp, her panties in a nearby chair. The pantyhose, well, they were a lost cause, so she tossed them in the bedroom trash can. Snatching her denim skirt off the floor, she shimmied into it before finally finding the ability to speak. When your parents are stolen from you, you never recover. You just don't get over it. And yes, I'm going to Stony Brook to finish this once and for all. You're not coming back, are you? This isn't just about your parents' murder, is it? This is about the other night when I said I love you. I knew you would freak out. I just wasn't sure how or when. Maggie's stomach twisted. She searched almost frantically for her blouse and shoes. Connor began to pace the length of the room. I knew it. I just figured that after being together for as long as we have, that it was time to come clean. I love you, Maggie, and I have for a while. Not asking you to marry me. I just want you to admit that we're more than a fling, more than friends with benefits. Maggie pulled her black shirt over her head. You've got to be kidding me. This isn't about you. This is about following the first real lead I've had in months. And for the record, I don't love you. This was always the hard part. They got too attached, and then it was like trying to break free from the jaws of a crocodile. The question was always, how much do you want to keep your arm? Yes, I care what happens to you, but this has never been anything more than sex. Really, really great sex with a guy that I like to hang out with, but just sex. Damn, my shoes are on the stairs. Glancing up, she saw Connor's jaw drop. It took a full minute before he seemed to realize it was open. Maggie, you should have cut him off after the first few months. Now that she felt like a complete bitch, she plowed ahead, but with a softer tone. Connor, The heartbreak on his face hammered at the steel cocoon that surrounded her own heart. I told you when we started this whole affair that I wasn't relationship material. I warned you that I was just a heartless bitch that liked a good time. The icy glare from his crystal blue eyes took her breath away. The human side of her wanted to comfort him in some small way. She chose the rational route. You don't have to worry about running into me. I'm leaving New York indefinitely. For what it's worth, I hope you find someone that can appreciate you for the great guy you are. Get out. He didn't scream at her, but the effect hit her just the same. Dive Bar, Lawrence Street, 10 p.m. Thomas Ramsey. He'll be the only one in a suit. Maggie stared at the piece of paper in her hand and checked her cell phone for the 10th time. 10:10. It's not like she could have missed him. The place lived up to its name. A handful of beat-up, mismatched tables were scattered around the rough, wooden-planked floor. Maggie was pretty sure if skin touched the floor, you'd be picking out splinters for months. The bar reached from one end of the room to the other, which was barely big enough to fit 2 of Connor's apartments into. Why a man in a suit would head into this cigarette smoke-infested hole, she had no idea. But that's what the note said, and, unfortunately, hope made you do stupid things. Thankfully, she had thought to do some reconnaissance and dress appropriately. Her black leather miniskirt and bustier left little to the imagination, but this seemed to be the place where the strippers and hookers stopped in for a drink. This was the one time Maggie was grateful for the fact that she loved wearing heels. Anyone not used to them would have been dying in her 4-inch stiletto boots. Pulling her phone out of her black clutch to check the time, she froze. The burly bartender with tattoos covering one side of his face stopped cleaning beer mugs and looked right at her. A giant grin spread across his brown, scraggly beard. Tom, where you been? I haven't seen you for a week. Tom? A week? Turning on her stool, she stole a look at the newcomer. He's got to be at least 6 foot, maybe taller. Late 30s, early 40s, but must hit the gym or running trail a couple times a week because there's no beer belly in that denim. Is he my Tom? Maggie watched as he grabbed a stool closer to the bartender. She made no effort to hide the admiration as her gaze traveled over his toned backside. No suit, just jeans and a t-shirt. Those jeans look way too nice to be someone other than my Tom. Taking a deep breath, Maggie downed the last of her beer. She'd need all the liquid courage she could get. She wasn't nervous about talking to the man. She was worried about the disappointment that would come if he couldn't help her. It only took 5 feet to reach him, but it might as well have been a mile for the volcano brewing in her stomach. Touching his warm shoulder with her fingertips, she hoped her voice wouldn't crack. Excuse me. So far, so good. The man turned, showing her the most amazing chestnut brown eyes she had encountered. Yes? Her chest tightened, her body immediately reacting to something in his gaze. Every sensitive peak and valley screamed to be touched. Swallowing hard, She fought the neediness in her voice. Are you Thomas Ramsey? His eyes roamed over the exposed tops of her breasts, down to the tips of her stiletto boots and back up. The chestnut eyes immediately grew hard and looked pointedly at the hand she had unconsciously left on his shoulder. I don't need a date, sweetheart. No, I put this on so that I wouldn't stand out. Look, I was told you could help me. Probably not. I'm a criminal defense attorney. His voice was soft enough that his next words took a moment to register. Whatever dispute you have with your baby's daddy is not something I would handle. My what? The idea was almost laughable. A rough hand clamped around her bicep. The bartender had somehow made it from behind the bar and began pulling her towards the door. I knew you were trouble, the gorilla-like man muttered. I know every working girl within 50 miles, and I ain't never seen you. Maggie knew she had to do something. Mr. Ramsey, I was told you know something about the man that killed my parents. I know lots of people, miss. Damn, almost to the door. Picking up her feet, she slipped out of the bartender's grasp and landed flat on her butt. Maggie clenched her teeth and flinched as a splinter shot into her thigh. Culver! Maggie Culver! A flash of recognition across Tom's face left her satisfied that the stabbing pain in her leg was worth it. Let her be, John. I'll talk to her. Thomas knew this was a bad idea. He had only been 8 when the Culvers were killed, but the effects had ricocheted through the small town like a bullet caught inside a steel box. The fact that Amelia Culver had been his babysitter after school made the loss personal. Watching the fidgeting brunette across from him made him wonder what Amelia would think of her daughter. The rational side of him was having serious trouble staying focused, while the black leather threatened to expose her breasts at any moment. Making a conscious effort, Thomas focused on her face. The closed-off look in her hazel eyes unnerved him even more. He raised a hand to John, the bartender, to bring them a couple of beers. How long have you been investigating their murder? Taking the beer from John, he took a swig. Since I was 18. When I was 16, I started asking around town to find out what people knew. After the 4th trip back to Stony Brook, my aunt found out what I was doing and forbid me to come back. Being the obedient child that I was, I stayed away. A couple of years later, Aunt Mavis died of a stroke. She was my mother's older sister, and I think the stress of handling a teen did her in. Thomas watched the sadness creep over her face, only to disappear as quickly as it came. Maggie was rubbing her fingers up and down the beer bottle, almost as if she was trying to use it as a distraction. For herself or him, he wasn't sure. With Aunt Mavis gone, there was no reason to stay at Collins Lake. I came back here looking for answers. Thomas watched as she stroked the beer bottle and squirmed in her seat. Was she trying to seduce him? What makes you think I know anything about what happened to your parents? I was just a kid when they died. He didn't bother to add that their unsolved murder was the reason he became an attorney. She didn't need that type of information from him. Maggie shifted in her seat again. A hissing sound was his answer as she froze, inhaling sharply. A few weeks ago, I received an anonymous letter saying that the killer was back in Stony Brook. I came back as fast as I could. That caught his attention. Back? Where were you living before? New York. And as for you, this morning I received a note attached to my hotel room door. She extended a crumpled piece of paper towards him. A quick scan told him that trouble was following him and Miss Maggie Culver. You have no idea who left this? She shook her head, a few brown strands of hair falling from her messy ponytail. Did you take any of this to the police where they could look for fingerprints or DNA? The very concept that someone was following him brought a chill to his blood. In his line of work, safety was vital to staying alive. No, the police in New York have decided that I'm just some hysterical woman, and that if someone is stalking me, there isn't anything I can do until I'm mangled or dead. The cops here in Stony Brook are just one big, good old boys reunion. Maggie shifted again, and another hiss escaped her lips. The last hiss sounded almost like a whimper, causing Thomas to suspect there was something more to her than simply trying to seduce him. "Are you okay?" "Yes," she squirmed again. "No." A bit afraid of what she might say, he took a deep breath. "Pantyhose riding up too high?" Her glare was a definite no. "If you must know, the floor in this place has spikes, and one of them is currently buried in my thigh." Images of her naked, on her back with his long, hard length buried between her thighs had him shifting to adjust his jeans. "It doesn't help that this skirt provides zero protection between my skin and the bench." "Oh, God." "Well, I can't very well let you sit here in pain. Let's go back to the bathroom and get it on. Out. Get the splinter out. Smooth, Thomas. Real smooth." Maggie followed him through the narrow hallway to the small washroom. "Are you sure we'll both fit?" "Do you want the splinter out or not?" This was only partially about helping ease her pain. Maggie recognized desire when she heard it. Once the door was closed, only 6 inches separated them. Something in his gaze made her weary, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Instead, she rubbed her upper arms with her hands. Thomas put the lid to the toilet down and sat with his knees apart. The toilet seat was low, which with her 5'6" frame made Thomas's eye level with her pelvis. "Come here and let me see." Why did I pick tonight to wear a thong? Maggie tugged at the black leather, hoping it would suddenly grow longer. "Time to take one for the team. I need his help." She turned to present her barely covered backside to him. Soft, warm hands wrapped around her thigh, turning, examining, poking, pulling. "Lean forward just a little." Maggie felt her skirt inching up. Cool air brushed the exposed skin. "I'm going to have a talk with John about his floors. A few inches in the wrong direction and you would have ended up in the hospital." She did not want to think about that part of her anatomy right now. The pain in her thigh was nothing compared to the torment she felt as his hands slid just under her butt. Just a few more inches to the left, and he would know just how wet she was. Connor must have seriously messed with her self-control. Maggie had been attracted to lots of men, but none had ever gotten her hot and bothered with just a look. And then the touching. "There," Thomas announced, handing her the 2-inch piece of wood that had been buried in her flesh. "Thank—" The words froze in her throat as his lips brushed the red, welted skin just below the curve of her butt. "I'm sorry." Thomas sat back on the toilet. "I shouldn't have done that." Her heart beat so loud in her ears, she knew Thomas must have heard it. "It's okay." She turned to face him, hoping that whatever happened or didn't happen next wasn't going to affect her working with this man. "I suppose under the circumstances, I should be happy to find that you're a gentleman." Thomas laughed. It was deep and masculine. She liked when he laughed. Stepping between his still spread thighs, she smiled down at him. "Most men wouldn't have been able to resist rubbing their fingers between my legs. Some would have even tried to lick me." "Maggie, I may be a gentleman, but if this is some game you're playing, it stops now." His voice sounded pained. Maggie shook her head. This wasn't her style. Some invisible force insisted that she had to have him. It had to be a result of having sex 2 and 3 times a day for the last year, and then going cold turkey this week. It's not a game. It's simple. I want you and you want me. You do want me, right? That's what the kiss was about. Thomas's hands remained on his thighs, as if some magic force kept them there. How do I know you're not just a tease? You wouldn't be the first woman to try to extract information from me by using her body. Did you forget that you were the one that invited me back here so that you could remove a hunk of wood from my leg? If I wanted to seduce you, I would have convinced you to take me home with you or invite you back to my hotel room. Point taken. I'm thinking the gray, dingy walls aren't exactly romantic. He chuckled. I think anywhere with you would be romantic. Where the hell did that come from? After all, you're a very attractive man. Picking up his left hand, Maggie briefly glanced at his naked ring finger before placing the warm palm between her legs. And you have very gentle hands. Thomas rubbed his hands against the soaking wet triangle between her legs. In a flash, he stood up, pushing her back against the wall. His hand moved the last tiny barrier to the side, and 2 fingers pushed inside. His thumb brushed her clit, starting the spiral towards release. Oh, no, you don't. Not ready to succumb to pleasure just yet, Maggie fumbled with his belt and the zipper on his jeans. Thomas's hot, smooth erection sprung from its restraints into her palms. Her thumb slipped over the tip, and she was awarded with a shudder. Looking up, her eyes locked with his. A tightness formed in her chest. A red flag was waving itself in her head. Somehow she knew that if they did this, it would change her life forever. She knew it, but she tempted fate anyway. Thomas's hands stroked her bare skin as she stroked his. The familiar sound of foil wrapper echoed in the small room. She felt her hand being nudged away. The condom was rolled down, and Thomas lifted her against the wall. He didn't slam into her like she'd expected. Her gaze still locked with his, he began slowly pushing into her. Maggie could feel her body stretching, filling, accommodating. This was too intimate. Closing her eyes only muffled the connection she felt. She tried to get closer, but Thomas held her hips still. Just when she thought she couldn't take any more, he pressed deeper, spreading her thighs wider. His chest pressed up against hers, both of them still closed from the waist up. Warm breath grazed her ear as he whispered, "Don't hide from me." Maggie opened her mouth to object just as a warm, teasing lips captured hers. His tongue danced lightly over hers, tasting of beer and something else she couldn't quite place. It was then that he began to move. His tongue imitated the slow thrusting of his body into hers. All time was lost, and she could think of nothing but the 2 places where their bodies joined as one. The wave of ecstasy grew as his pace quickened. The peak hit, sending her body tumbling over crest after crest of pleasure. She would have screamed if her mouth was free from his. Thomas shoved deep inside her, pinning her against the wall, groaning into her mouth. Thomas stared at the report on his computer. The night he left Maggie at her hotel, he had contacted his private investigator. Then he called his security team to keep an eye out for anyone following Miss Culver. That was 2 days ago. He still couldn't get that night out of his mind. What was I thinking? Screwing her in the bathroom at that dive bar was completely insane. Not that taking a beautiful woman to a hotel for a one-night stand was out of the ordinary, but losing all sense of control was totally out of character, especially when he knew almost nothing about the woman. Thankfully, his crack investigator was the best in the business. Ramsey didn't hire stuff like this out to the locals. Stony Brook had too much small-town gossip without adding to the pile. In a matter of minutes, he had learned all he needed to know about Miss Maggie Culver. Aged 32 years, never married, no kids, raised by her aunt and uncle in nearby Gables, Georgia, until her uncle died when she was 10. Then her aunt raised her until she died, like Maggie had said. She was a pediatric nurse at a fancy hospital in New York until she quit to move back home. The home that never really was hers to start with. He couldn't find a record of any new job. So just how long is she planning to stay? Probably not very long after she realizes it's all dead end. Both Amelia and her husband, Robert, were in their late 20s, just getting started in their lives. Amelia watched him and a few other kids during the day. She loved kids. He still remembered the days filled with crafts, games of hide and seek, and homemade snacks after school. He even remembered baby Maggie. One day they were there, and the next day they were gone. Thomas knew that several teenagers in the area were originally suspected of murdering the couple. Witnesses said they heard screaming and loud popping noises. 4 teens were seen running from the house, but it was too dark for anyone to see what they looked like. Thomas always suspected that the neighbors were too scared to say anything. He had asked his older brother, who was 16 at the time, if he knew anyone that would do something like this. Thomas knew that the kids Larry hung around with were into drugs and partying. One of Larry's older buddies had been arrested for robbing a convenience store. Larry promptly told him not to be sticking his nose where it didn't belong. "Hi." A timid female voice came from across the room. Thomas looked up to find Maggie standing in the doorway, wearing worn jeans, white sneakers, and a black t-shirt that read, "I was stupid." He was pretty sure her wardrobe screamed, "Hands off." Normally, his large mahogany door was closed so that his administrative assistant could ward off unwanted visitors. But today, she had the day off, and Thomas had left the door open. Standing, he made his way around the desk, only to halt within 10 feet of her. "Hi." Adjusting his red necktie, Thomas knew he was stalling. The other night was pretty damn amazing. Maggie's pink lips curved upwards. He rubbed the back of his neck. How am I going to get out of this? He couldn't lie to her. Yes, I think amazing just about covers it. It was also a one-time thing. We don't even know each other. But you know something about me. Her smile disappeared. At least you know something about my parents' death. He released the breath he had been holding. I'm not sure who sent you the note or what they think I know. Thomas handed her the envelope of evidence off of his desk. This is everything I could find on their murder. The police figured it was just a couple of teenagers looking for something to steal. The problem was that they couldn't find out who it was. His stomach filled with lead. The urge to reach out to touch her was almost too great to resist. The cold, calculating expression on Maggie's face as she read over the details and photos of her parents' murder let him know that his reassurance would not be welcome. After coming to the last page, Maggie hugged the folder to her chest. Thomas swallowed hard. He followed her over to the leather chaise and insisted she sit down. Carefully not to touch her, he sat just a few inches away. You've got nothing else? The hopelessness that filled her eyes stabbed at his heart. No, I'm sorry. Then why did they tell me to find you? More importantly, how did they know where you would be? I mean, they could have just sent me here to your office. Instead, they sent me to some hellhole. I've been working on that the last few days, and my guys have come up empty. Trust me, I'm just as concerned, if not more so, than you. My clients require the utmost discretion, and someone following me after hours is very unsettling. Maggie narrowed her eyes, her eyebrows drawing together. I'm gathering you don't defend the most honorable of men? Do you think one of your clients could have been the one who shot my parents? It was a question Thomas often asked himself. Every time someone came into his office, he wondered if this was one of the slime balls that had killed the Culvers in cold blood. I don't know. Look, Maggie, I need to be completely honest. I knew your parents when they were killed. Thomas had begun relating the sordid story that had changed his whole world as a child. He pressed on as he watched her withdraw into herself, knowing that his suspicions of his brother's friends would only put a larger wall between them, made him leave that part out of the story. She was so closed off and cold that he needed to touch her, to reassure her. Reaching out to take her hand in his, Thomas rubbed his thumb across the back of her hand. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes filled with need. All breath left his body, his chest tightening. What were they like? Her whisper was nearly lost in the large office. I've heard stories about them from my aunt, but what did you know of them? I remember bits and pieces. During the summer, Miss Culver would set up the sprinkler in the kiddie pool. She always had popsicles or ice cream, and even though I was 8, she made me take a nap. I remember her giving you baths in the kitchen sink so she could keep an eye on the rest of us. And she made the best snickerdoodles I've ever eaten. I heard Mr. Culver tell her more than once that her cooking was heavenly. He seemed to really adore her. Maggie couldn't stop the tears. The more Thomas talked, the more sadness squeezed her heart. The hand that held hers shifted. She held on to the small lifeline tighter. The concerned look in his gaze penetrated the wall around her heart. She couldn't resist sliding into his protective embrace as she released the tears that had been bottled up for decades. A soothing hand rubbed her back. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. I'm so sorry. I wish there was something I could do. Maggie tried to focus, but this warm, fuzzy feeling was something completely new. She felt safe, at home. There wasn't any place in the world she'd rather be than in Thomas's arms right now. Come on, Maggie. You're just in lust with this man. He's a connection to your parents. His chest felt so good against her cheek. The heat through his designer dress shirt called to her to crawl up in his lap and never leave. Instead, she looked up to meet his gaze, allowing her hand to slip onto his upper thigh. His hand covered hers, holding it in place. Maggie thought he was going to say something. His mouth opened, but no sound escaped. The warm brush of his lips against hers pulled at the moist spot between her legs. A large, masculine hand cupped the side of her head. His lips were gentle, his tongue tracing around her mouth, teasing, inviting her mouth to open. Just like the first time, his tongue danced seductively with hers. She felt the fortress around her heart being chipped away at. Each moment in his arms pulled down the walls she had built. Thomas pulled back first. I want to help you as much as I can. I'll use all of my resources to help find out what happened all those years ago. Thank you. A spark of hope joined in with the warmth in her chest. Thomas immediately got his best researchers and investigators on the case. He promised them a huge bonus for all of the overtime involved. After all, the whole thing was a cold case that even Maggie's constant efforts over the last decade had turned up empty. Okay, not exactly empty. They had led her to him, something he couldn't very well dismiss. He hadn't found out who was feeding her information, but part of him was glad that she was in his life. Since Maggie so suddenly appeared in his life, all he could think about was her soft skin, receptive and plump mouth, and how they fit together perfectly. And it wasn't just her softly rounded body that held his attention. She made him laugh, brought him back down to earth, and managed to make even the most mundane activities exciting. "Mr. Ramsey, your brother is online too. He says he only has 10 minutes. Todd's voice echoed through the speaker into his office. His administrative assistant never minced words. Thomas snatched up the phone on his desk. "Hi, Larry." "You need to stop looking into the Culver murder." The familiar male voice sounded desperate. "What? How did you—" "I only have 6 minutes left, so shut up. The people involved don't like you asking questions. You need to leave the past buried." Thomas felt a roll of acid fill his stomach. "You know who killed them, don't you?" Larry's hard edge came through the phone. "Leave it alone, damn it!" "It was Seth and Dave." Thomas ran his hand over the back of his neck as the thought hit him. "Please tell me you weren't with them. Please, Larry, tell me you didn't have anything to do with this." "My time's up. Drop it, Tom, before someone else gets hurt." It was a full minute or two before the dial tone registered through his thoughts. His suspicions were right all along. His brother had been there the night the Culvers were killed. Sliding into the cushioned brown leather chair, Thomas placed his head in his hands. What if Larry was the one who pulled the trigger? No, his brother was screwed up, but not a murderer. Thomas snatched up the phone, demanding that his private investigators dig as deeply as possible into Seth Corded and David Hedger. He knew it would be dangerous because of the type of men they were, but there was little choice in the matter. "You look upset. Everything okay?" Maggie's voice washed over him, bringing a moment of calm before releasing the chaos of indecision. "You can't tell her about Larry. She wouldn't understand, and without proof, there's nothing we can do." "Yeah, fine." Thomas forced a smile, hoping it reached his eyes. "Just a case that has me stumped. My client's alibi doesn't seem to be very reliable." "How about we do some lunch to get your mind off things?" "Anytime I get to spend with my beautiful woman will keep my mind off work." This time his smile was genuine. What a difference a week made. He never realized how lonely his life was until this sassy brunette plopped her butt down on a dive bar's prickly wooden floor. Maggie pressed her lips to his, nipping and sucking on his lower lip. She could feel that something was wrong. There was an awkward veil between them. Her breast grazed his chest as her arms snaked up around his neck. She needed the closeness, needed to prove that he wasn't keeping something from her. They were both lost in the kiss. Thomas pulled back. "If we're going to make it for lunch, we better go." The desire in his eyes soothed Maggie's unease. "Maybe we should just stay here and have dessert." "Not with my assistant just outside the door. I'm just a prude that way." "Okay." Maggie slid a hand discreetly down the growing bulge in his slacks. "Perhaps later tonight?" "Count on it." Thomas tapped his fingers on the gray counter in front of him. In 2 weeks, the skies hadn't turned up a single solid piece of evidence on Seth or David, so he had to go straight to the source. Larry. The thin, gray-haired man in the orange jumpsuit sat down across from him and picked up the phone. They stared at one another through the plexiglass pane. "It's been a long time," Larry rasped. "Cut the small talk. Tell me what happened that night. I need to know." Larry shook his head. So my warning did nothing? Thomas narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. Larry closed his eyes. Yeah, I was there that night. We broke into the house to rob it. They told me the Culvers were out for the night, only they weren't. I guess Seth had a thing for Mrs. Culver. They shot her old man before Seth took the lady in the bedroom. I almost bolted then, till Dave told me to help him find the baby's room. I'll never forget the look on his face when he said it, or the hunting knife in his hands. So I went and searched for the baby, hoping I would find it first. Thankfully, she was sleeping. I picked her up and hid her in the closet with her bottle. To this day, I don't know how she slept through all the noise. Thomas froze as the gray eyes met his own. Maggie could have been... Please drop it. You have no idea what those men are capable of. They killed that couple just for the fun of it. They were only 17. What do you think they are willing to do now if they think their freedom is threatened? Rubbing the back of his neck, Thomas shook his head. I can back off, but my girlfriend won't. She's been looking for answers for too long. Somehow I don't think she'll care how dangerous they are. So how do I tell her I've got the answers, but there's nothing we can do? I've missed you. Maggie kissed a trail across the back of Thomas's neck. She loved his musky scent. He chuckled and sat down on the king-size bed, loosening his burgundy tie. I was only gone for a day. Yes. She pressed her front on his back and slid her arms around his neck. But we have to make up for lost time. What lost time? The catch in his voice didn't go unnoticed. Well, just think about it. If I had grown up in Stony Brook, then we would have known each other most of our lives. Don't you think this is, well, sort of fate? Thomas shrugged. Maybe. Although I would still like to know who sent you that letter. Maybe it was Cupid or an angel or some other mysterious being. All I know is that that letter led me to you and to new leads about my parents. Maggie wasn't about to let him ruin this magical feeling she had whenever she was in his presence, or whenever she simply thought about him. He had somehow destroyed the fortress around her heart that had been erected years ago. Now her heart was open and bare, ready for the giving. She reached down to assist him in removing his tie and began unbuttoning his shirt. Her body instantly reacted to the warmth under his shirt. I need you, Thomas. Desire licked at her breasts and between her legs. Please, I need to be close to you. He stood and removed his pants, as Maggie quickly removed and tossed her sundress to the side. She met his gaze with all of her love and desire in her eyes. The same love was mirrored in his eyes. Please, she whispered. Thomas pushed her back on the bed, knowing that this time was different. Lips and hands caressed, kissed, worshipped her body. Maggie writhed on the bed, muttering soft words of encouragement. They were both lost in giving each other the most amazing pleasure possible. Maggie felt her knees being pushed up and apart. Thomas knelt between her thighs. Their eyes met. He pulled her outer folds apart. God, you're beautiful. The moment his tongue touched her sensitive skin, Maggie jerked. She moaned with each stroke of his tongue. When his fingers pressed into her, she saw stars. The rising orgasm crashed over her, only to rise again. Then he was over her, sliding his rigid length inside her. Look at me. His words could barely be heard. Her eyes met his for one of the most intimate moments of her life. You'll always be mine. His voice branded her. Thomas moved excruciatingly, slowly building them both to the brink before Maggie felt herself and her entire world shatter. "I love you," she heard herself whisper just before her mind went black. "What do you mean we can't go after them?" Maggie felt as if her entire world had been thrown into a tornado. Thomas rubbed his neck. Maggie noticed he did that often when he was stressed. "You have a witness for the night my parents were killed, and you're telling me we can't go after the two men who did it? Why the hell not?" She knew screaming wasn't really fair, but the fact that they were so close to closing the case just infuriated her. "There's not any physical evidence. It's just this one guy's word against theirs. Not to mention, it was a very long time ago. If this guy, whoever he is, wasn't going to tell his story to the cops, then why did he tell you?" "He was warning me to drop the case. He said it was too dangerous to keep sniffing around these guys, and he's right." Thomas reached to caress her cheek. Maggie took a step back. She really wished she was dressed for this discussion. Wearing nothing but Thomas's black terry cloth robe left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. "Maggie, I don't want anything to happen to you." A feeling of dread poured through her stomach towards her heart, wiping out the anger as it went. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to fight off the cold. "Why was he warning you? Why does this man, this informant, care what happens to me or you?" Thomas looked at the ground. Maggie held her silence, letting it grow like an invisible wall between them. She nearly lost her balance when his tortured gaze returned to meet her eyes. "Because he's my brother." Her throat hurt so bad she didn't think the words would come, but she had to know. There was something more he was keeping from her. "Why did he keep quiet when all this happened? You said the boys were just teenagers." "Because he was with them when they broke into your house. He thought it was going to be nothing more than a robbery. He didn't even know anyone was home." "No, no, no." The tears fell as she stumbled up the stairs to the bedroom. Thomas followed, begging her to listen, but she didn't want to hear his lies anymore. She had to put her clothes on and get out of his place. How could she be so stupid? The two of them were probably in it together. Thomas gets her to fall in love with him just long enough to get her to stop investigating. "I swear I didn't know anything about this until a few weeks ago." He grabbed her arm, attempting to halt her progress. "My brother didn't pull the trigger, Maggie. He saved your life." She jerked her arm free, and he didn't try to stop her. "How can a man not know his brother is a murderer?" Maggie held up a hand. "Just stop. Even if you didn't know then, you still managed to sleep with me and spout how much you love me, all while keeping this secret." Maggie grabbed her purse and headed down the stairs. She could hear Thomas close behind her. "I had to check out his story. I couldn't come to you with something I wasn't sure was true." Maggie spun around. Thomas nearly slammed into her from the abrupt stop. "And how do you know it's the truth?" "Because he knew things about that night that were never released to the public." "Like what?" Maggie rubbed the ache in her chest. "Maggie, please. Tell me." Thomas shook his head. The hopelessness in his eyes urged part of her to forget the whole thing. The part that still loved him wanted to pull him into her arms and tell him it was okay, that she could forgive him. But how would she know if he ever truly loved her, or if he was just protecting his brother? Had he ever really loved her at all? A sharp, slicing pain hit her heart, taking her breath away. "I don't want to see you again. Ever." Somehow she made it out the door and to her car. Thomas followed. Maggie, you don't mean that. Listen to me. There are just some things you don't want to know about that night. Some things should be left in the past. Please don't go. Damn it, Maggie. If I didn't love you, then I wouldn't be fighting for you to stay. You lied to me. You made me care about you. Hell, you made me fall in love with you, claiming you knew nothing about my parents' murder, only for me to find out that your brother, was part of the teenagers that killed them? For all I know, you are the one who sent the note to my apartment to come back to Stony Brook. What? Maggie, that's crazy. Stay away from me, Thomas. I plan on finding out who did it without you as a diversion. You can go back to getting your guilty clients off and leave me the hell alone. Maggie ignored Thomas's pleas, backing the car down the driveway and out into traffic. Tears that came from the never-ending pain in her chest flowed down her cheeks and dropped onto her jeans. I'll never trust another man again. Book 2. The warm water sprinkled over her skin. Maggie knew a cold shower would be better, but she couldn't resist the hot, soothing rivulets that beat down her shoulders, glided over her sensitive breasts, and down her slender legs. The dream of Thomas sneaking into her bed still clung to her. She couldn't shake the desire that had built, waking her sweating and soaked between her legs. Closing her eyes, Maggie allowed herself to enjoy the remnants of the dream. Thomas had crept into her bed, naked, whispering how sorry he was for all the lies he told and how much he loved her. He confessed that he would go to the ends of the earth for her if she would just forgive him. Maggie couldn't resist his soft caresses, the feel of his hands softly caressing her breasts. His lips brushed hers, encouraging her to open to him. She was lost in passion and emotion as his mouth took hers. His hands were everywhere, stroking, coaxing. He cupped the triangle between her legs. Maggie's knees fell open. Thomas teased her, brushing his finger across her opening. Maggie pressed her hips to his hand. She needed this, needed release. After the last few weeks alone, "Please," she whispered. A single finger dipped inside her, curving upward. His thumb brushed her very sensitive clit. "I love you," he whispered. The sensation was too much. Maggie's body exploded in pleasure. Tears joined the water from the shower as the spasms from her release continued through her body. The dream brought back the harsh reality of how alone she really was. Sliding down the wall of the shower, sobs echoed back at her from the tile walls. The ache in her chest tightened. Why can't I let go of him? Thomas Ramsey picked up the phone, only to set it back down on the desk. He couldn't make amends with Maggie without producing some sort of evidence of who killed her parents. As much as he wanted to drop the case and keep her safe, she wasn't forgiving him for keeping the killer's identities a secret. Why can't she see that no evidence equals a wild goose chase that will only get us both killed? "Mr. Ramsey, Marcus Finelli is here to see you." An unemotional voice of his assistant broke through the speaker on his desk. "Send him in." Thomas hoped for good news from his private detective. Reaching a hand out, Thomas shook the beefy hand of the slightly older man. He wasn't sure of Finelli's age, but he would guess late 40s or early 50s. Regardless, the man was intimidating and had the skills to take on any threat he came across. "Please tell me you have good news." "Whoever is feeding Maggie Culver information is staying as far away as possible. I've got some guys hunting down leads, but so far the letters that are delivered have come from florists, a bakery, and a Chinese takeout place. They all deliver an item and a note. Each said they were paid to deliver both, but the person that hired them ranged from an elderly man to a young woman. My guys are trying to figure out if it's a group of people in this together, or if one person is hiring others to make these arrangements. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck. Has there been any suspicious activity around Miss Culver other than the anonymous letters? The large man shook his bald head. Not so far. Of course she doesn't seem to be actively following up on any of the leads. Thomas sat on the edge of his desk. Oh? She's been too busy moving into a new apartment. Got a job at the children's hospital. 12-hour shifts don't leave a lot of time for snooping for most people. Thomas sighed. A job meant that she was definitely sticking around. His heart released a bit of hope that she could still forgive him. In the pit of his stomach, he was afraid she was going to end up in a body bag. Keep an eye on her. I'll bet she's doing more snooping than you think. Will do. And Mr. Ramsey, I suggest you bump up your security until we figure out who's tipping her off. It seems this guy has it in for you, since he led her straight to you. Thanks, Finelli. I will see about getting some extra security guys. Same goes for Miss Culver. I want protection detail on her 24/7. But tell them to keep their distance. I don't want her finding out or getting spooked. Yes, sir. Thomas eyed the crowded bar. It was only Thursday, but there were quite a few people who seemed to be celebrating the weekend early. This is a bad idea, but I've got to see her. His assistant had happily supplied him with the name of the bar near the hospital that medical staff frequented. His exact words were, "Please go see this woman so you can stop working like a madman." Apparently his 18-plus-hour days had been noticed. Of course, showering in his corporate bathroom probably had been a bit of a giveaway as well. So here he was, nursing his second beer and hoping that Maggie stopped in. Yeah, that's not pathetic. So my ignoring your phone calls and voice messages wasn't enough of a hint? You had to track me down? Maggie slid onto the stool next to him. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the pained look in her eyes crushed his heart. I wanted to make sure you were okay. You mean after you lied to me and broke my heart? I'm peachy. She ordered a beer before turning her full gaze on him. Thomas saw the anger, but beyond that, he saw the hurt. He wasn't sure which was worse. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sweetheart, if I could take it all back, I would. Maggie closed her eyes. When she opened them, the emotion was gone. Why won't your brother come forward? Why doesn't he tell a judge what happened? Thomas shook his head. She has no idea what she's dealing with. 2 reasons. 1, it's his word against theirs. 2, they'll have him killed before he could testify. They'll even make it look like an accident so no one is the wiser. Can't police offer him protection? No. These people make their living off of looking respectable and being as crooked as they come. They know how to cut loose ends and make sure that nothing leads back to them. She seemed to digest this information as she took a swig of her beer. I'm not going to quit looking for my parents' killers. That's what I was afraid of. Do you care that it's going to get you killed? Do you think that's what your parents would have wanted for you? To die without having lived? Screw you! Maggie tossed money on the bar and stormed out. Damn. Thomas grabbed a few bills and dropped them on the bar, running to catch up. Where are you going on foot? His long legs matched her steps easily. Home, which is where you should be. Your home. Leave me alone, Thomas. I don't need another asshole telling me how screwed up my life is. Go back to your money and your crooked clients and leave me the hell alone. I don't need someone who defends scumbags for a living telling me how to live my life. Thomas clenched his fists. You have no idea why I do what I do. And as for leaving you alone, I will not let you walk home at night by yourself when you have some crazy stalker person sending you anonymous letters. I knew it! Maggie screeched. I knew you couldn't resist keeping tabs on me. That's how you were in that bar tonight, and I'm guessing you know where I live, too. He resisted the urge to grab her and shake some sense into her. You won't answer your phone or return my calls, so yes, I had someone check up on you to make sure you were still alive. In case you missed it, I'm currently the only one around who gives a damn if you're dead or alive. The last words came out as more of a yell. Maggie was silent. Her eyes stayed straight ahead for the next few blocks until they reached the main door of her apartment building. She stopped and turned to him, the hopelessness evident in her shining eyes. The whisper was a knife slicing his heart. Thank you for pointing out how truly alone I am. Now go. Just go. But he couldn't. He would never forgive himself for sending her into an empty apartment after spouting the ugly truth. So Thomas did the only thing he knew to do. He pulled her into his arms, ignoring the small struggles she put up, and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of desire, but of love. His love. Keeping her lips pressed tightly together, Maggie tried to remain detached from the warm lips against hers. No, 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 no. He's only going to shred what's left of your heart, Maggie. It was the raw emotion that won her over. Her mouth welcomed his as her arms crept around his neck. The warmth from his embrace blocked out the cold and loneliness that had surrounded her daily life. She wasn't sure how they made it up to her apartment, but the moment the door closed, she began tearing at the buttons on his shirt. The urge to touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin, shoved rational thought out of her mind. Pure, unadulterated need to be connected with the man in front of her sent heat rushing through her body. His lips moved over her jaw, to her neck, nuzzling there for a moment. Maggie let out a groan. I need to be naked with you. Thomas pulled back to catch her glaze. Maggie didn't try to hide. She saw the same need in his eyes. Her scrubs were removed and tossed somewhere in the room. She helped Thomas remove his undershirt and slacks. The bedroom was too far away. Maggie kissed her way down the tan pecs to his lightly furred stomach until she reached the evidence of his arousal. Her hands stroked his hard length as her tongue danced over the tip. Thomas let out a growl before joining her on the floor and pressing her backwards. The cold, hardwood floor sent shivers through her as Thomas's warm body came down on top of her. His soft lips came down on hers as his hand moved between her legs. She was so wet. His fingers met no resistance. 1, 2, 3 fingers teased her. Maggie bent her knees, lifting her hips to give him greater access. Her hands roamed his chest, his back, anything to increase the skin-to-skin contact. She just needed to be closer to him. Maggie risked looking up. He was watching her, studying her, as if this were the last time he would ever see her. Maggie felt her heart catch in her throat. Thomas grabbed her wrists, pinning them over her head. She felt the pressure of his body joining hers, slow at first before slamming the rest of the way inside her. It was then that time was lost. A sense of urgency seemed to come over him as much as it did her. Hands and lips roamed each other as hips joined together over and over again. Maggie felt her body spasm again and again until she couldn't tell where one orgasm ended and another began. Thomas couldn't believe they ended up in her bed. That was never his intention. Maggie's warm butt pressed up against his growing erection was just more proof that he couldn't stay away from her. They fit perfectly together. Maggie snuggled closer to his chest. He leaned back as she turned towards him. Smiling up at him, she ran a finger down his chest. You realize this was nothing more than sex, right? I still haven't forgiven you for breaking my heart. Landing in a bucket of ice water couldn't have cooled his erection any faster. The calm and vicious tone in her voice didn't seem like his Maggie at all. He wasn't buying it. Is there another man that has ever made you come as many times as I did last night? That has ever brought you close to tears of ecstasy? Yeah, my last boyfriend. Maggie sat up on her knees, seeming completely at home to have this discussion while flaunting her nakedness. He was fun. Some days we'd have sex 2 or 3 times. Couldn't keep our hands off each other. The thing that man could do with... Furious, Thomas jumped off the bed and pulled on his clothes. I got it. He was dangerously close to punching something, and he prided himself on his restraint. Jealousy had never been a problem for him. If a woman wanted to be with another man, then he let her go. So why was he so pissed to think of Maggie with another man? Because you're in love with her, stupid. What's the matter? Maggie crawled off the bed to stand within arm's length. You don't honestly think you're the only man I've ever been with. Thomas wanted to look indifferent and made her think he didn't care how many men she had slept with or about the fact that she was naked. But for once, he was having a hard time with his poker face. He nearly took a step back when she stepped closer. Hold your ground. Maggie's hands moved over his chest. The warmth did nothing to take the chill from her words. Would you like it if I rode you the way I used to ride him? He used to go on and on about how much he liked seeing my breasts bounce up and down as... Enough! He grabbed her hands and forced her away from him. Her satisfied smirk told him all he needed to know. If you want to risk your life, then fine. But let's be clear on one thing. The lie that you insist I told you was for nothing more than to protect you. The disgust and hurt in his heart warred with pure rage. But this discussion is nothing more than you trying deliberately to hurt and embarrass me. Congratulations, you reached your mark. Was that a flicker of guilt in her eyes? I thought I had lost you, but I never thought I would be sorry that I loved you. Maggie couldn't move. Even after the door slammed shut, she stood naked in the middle of her bedroom. She had been dangerously close to forgiving Thomas. Their lovemaking had been unlike anything she had experienced. But he had broken her heart, and she couldn't forgive him for that. Resurrecting her inner bitch had been the only defensive mechanism that would save her heart. Only she didn't feel like her heart had been saved. It had just walked out the door. The look of disgust on Thomas's face wasn't anything new, but coming from the man she still loved, it carved another hole in her soul. A chime from her phone alerted her to a text message. Maggie moved to her dresser, her body aching with each step. Every muscle in her body ached. She pulled on clean underwear and her black sweatsuit. Her hands shook as she picked up her cell phone. Your boyfriend is lying to you. Why don't you go visit his brother Larry in prison? She's where? Thomas couldn't believe he heard Finelli correctly. Waiting to visit with your brother. How did she find out where he was? I don't know. She left early this morning. Good thing I had Danny watching her. Her days off normally means she stays in for the day. She's going to get us all killed. Wait, she's coming out. She seems more than a little pissed. Don't think your brother agreed to meet with her. She's muttering something. Can't tell if she's on the phone or not. I'll keep you posted. Thanks, Finelli. I'll be in touch. Thomas forced himself to concentrate on work over the next few hours. He was due in court this week and needed to be at the top of his game in front of Judge Allen. He was waist-deep in depositions and police reports when the mahogany doors of his office flew open. So much for leaving me alone. Maggie's long strides had her in front of his desk in seconds. Thomas slowly stood. He wasn't going to let her rile him this time. Her gray dress slacks and black conservative top surprised him, but did nothing to hide the curves underneath. I'm sure you made it clear there is nothing between us but sex, so please explain what you're talking about. Thomas noticed his administrative assistant, Tom, closing the office doors. He made note that Todd probably deserved a raise for his discretion. I'm talking about the fact that Larry refused to see me, and some huge bald man has been my shadow for the last week. And you assume that both those things have to do with me? Thomas crossed his arms across his chest, thankful for the reliable armor of his Armani suit. I know damn well they have to do with you. I had nothing to do with Larry. He knew who you were before I said anything to him. As for the large bald man, yes, I have him making sure you stay safe, although I'll have to inform him that his surveillance skills are getting rusty. I can take care of myself. Thomas let his eyes drink in every inch of her soft curves as he rounded the desk. He was still a few feet away as he smelled her floral shampoo. His voice was just barely above a whisper. You went to a male prison looking like that, smelling better than anything those men have smelled in a really long time? Do you call that taking care of yourself? She wanted to slap him, to demand that he stop being so chauvinistic. Only the desire in his eyes had her heart racing. Her tongue escaped her mouth to wet her dry lips. Thomas's eyes flickered downward to watch. Maggie could feel her breathing quicken. Giving in to physical temptation was so easy for her, it made it impossible to resist him now. Instead of slapping him, her arms went around his neck, bringing his lips down to hers. He didn't put up a fight. She felt her slacks loosen and fall to her feet. The cool air brushed her naked butt and hips. His hands slid over each inch, discovering that she wore only thigh-highs underneath her pants. Her hands moved to his pants, removing his belt and lowering the zipper. Thomas grabbed her thighs and hoisted her up to his waist, leaving her pants in a puddle on the floor. Her tender breasts pressed against her lace bra, begging to be released. He carried her across the room, never breaking their kiss. He put her down to her feet, carefully running his fingers between her legs. A small twinge of panic wove through her desire. Is he going to ask me to leave? But Thomas didn't ask her to leave. He pulled his pants and boxer briefs down and sat on the leather couch. He motioned to her with his finger to come to him. Maggie straddled him, lowering herself slowly onto his very full erection. She controlled the pace, rotating her hips slowly as his long fingers moved under her blouse, unhooking her bra. His hands moved to cup her breasts. His thumbs brushed her already hard nipples, causing her to arch her back. Warm breath teased her. Maggie moved her fingers into his silky hair, pulling his mouth closer. The hot, wet mouth sucking on her sent her over the edge. Maggie began sliding up and down, faster and faster. Oh, God, yes! Oh, Thomas! He grabbed her hips hard, his fingers digging into her flesh, holding her still, coming inside her. Thomas watched as Maggie bent over to pick up her slacks off the floor. I'm not going to call off the bodyguard. Maggie sighed and stepped into her pants. I didn't think you would. I just wanted you to know that he wasn't hiding very well and that I wasn't very happy about being followed around like an errant teenager. Maybe instead of having him follow you around, I could just bend you over my knee and spank you. That normally wasn't something he was into, but he could see the benefits of having her naked from waist down and at the mercy of his pleasure. Well, if I let anyone spank me, it would be you. Her eyes reflected the teasing note in her voice. A glimmer of hope flared in his heart. How about dinner to start, and we'll see where it goes? Thomas felt their connection close off. The warm afterglow was gone. No! Her anger echoed off the walls. I can't trust you. The words ate at his heart. Thomas took a step towards her. Trust that I want to keep you safe. Safe doesn't answer the question that has consumed me for over a decade. Maggie stared at her phone. A different text message had arrived each day of the last week. Each day the phone number sending it was different, and none of the clues seemed to help. Some were just downright creepy. They started the day after she barged into Thomas's office. You'll just spread your legs anywhere, won't you? Your boyfriend has all the evidence needed to convict the murderers. What is he waiting for? Maybe if you bribe the guards with a good fuck, they'll let you talk to Larry. I'm disappointed in you. You're not trying hard enough to find the truth. Ask around about Seth Corded and Dave Hedger. They're old pals with Larry. What's the matter? A concerned female voice interrupted her train of thought. Maggie looked up to see the petite blonde night nurse grabbing a cup of coffee. Just personal crap. She tried offering a reassuring smile. Sometimes I think I should just stick to the job and sleep. Having a hard time adjusting to a new town? The young woman asked. Sure, go with that. I guess that's it. Maggie rubbed her head, praying the headache would go away. I'm sure it helps to have your boyfriend around. Maggie looked up, her eyes narrowing. I'm sorry, what's your name? Elise. And just what is it you know about my boyfriend? Her stomach flipped over. Was there a spy at her own job? Well, I figured that's who was always texting you, and then there was the cute guy asking about you last week. Cute guy? What are we, teenagers? What guy? The Chris Hemsworth lookalike. Said he's your boyfriend and wanted to check up on you. Still nothing. Maggie shook her head. You know, the Thor guy. Oh, okay. That's definitely something to investigate. You're a lucky lady if you're hooking up with that every night. Elise wiggled her eyebrows to emphasize her statement before heading out of the lounge area. An older woman in her 60s collapsed on the chair opposite of Maggie. All right, chick, spill it. What has you looking like something the cat threw up? Maggie clamped a hand over her mouth as her small dinner threatened to evacuate her stomach. I don't think that's the right expression, Irma. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Trust me, it's the right one. Now tell me, what has you all green around the gills? It's just stress. I'm going through a lot at home. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm going to have to drag it out of you, huh? Irma sat back and crossed her arms over her ample bosom. I'm thinking it has something to do with a man, right? Sort of. Maggie really didn't want to go down this road. Irma looked her up and down until she felt like a horse waiting to be traded on the auction block. Maggie squirmed. You think she could read my mind or something? When was your last period? Maggie nearly fell out of her chair. What? You're cranky, you put on a little bit of weight this last week, and you're looking more and more tired. It might be stress, but if you've been doing the hanky-panky, then it might be something else. Or should I say someone else? Well, that's just ridiculous. I always use... Oh, God. That night at her apartment, and then at the office, they had been skin to skin, and she hadn't given it a second thought. Maggie rushed to the nearest trash can as her dinner spilled out. The mysterious blonde man and the fear of being pregnant was just too much. Irma, I need to go home. I won't do the kids any good tonight. The older woman nodded. Get some rest. Try some ginger tea for the nausea. It helped me with my morning sickness. The walk to the parking deck was the longest she had ever made. Morning sickness. I can't have a child right now. Irma's just imagining things. Although I did miss my period last week, it could just be stress. Maggie's heart was torn. A small part of her wondered what it would be like to have a child of her own. Thomas's child. Would she quit trying to find her parents' killer if she was pregnant? Surely not. Exhaustion set in. Time to call for reinforcements. Dialing Thomas's cell phone, she took a deep breath. Ramsey here. There's a man going around the hospital pretending to be my boyfriend. Did you hire him? Maggie, are you okay? You sound off. Maggie released a weak laugh. I'm too tired to argue. A fellow nurse told me some muscle-bound guy with long, dirty blonde hair has been asking around, telling people he's my boyfriend. Is he one of your guys? She heard Thomas sigh from the other end of the phone. No. The nausea in her stomach rose again. That's what I was afraid of. Hey, you sound really tired. Where are you? The worry was almost a visible thing over the phone line. I'm on my way home from work. I'm going to get some sleep and I'll call you in the morning. Why don't you wait there and I'll come pick you up? You sound too out of it to drive. Maggie pulled onto the main road. She normally walked home, but it was way too cold out lately. I'll be fine, as long as the guy behind me will quit tailgating me. She hit the phone button on her dash. She wasn't quite ready to hang up just yet. Baby, please, just pull over and let me come get you. The headlights in her rearview mirror moved closer and closer. Go around! Rolling her window down, Maggie motioned for the large SUV to pass her. The first impact had both hands clamping down on the steering wheel. Oh my God! She tried speeding up. The SUV joined her. Maggie, what's going on? Thomas's voice spread throughout the cab of her car. She struggled to keep the car on the road as the SUV hit harder. The rear of the car started to fishtail, but she compensated and kept it straight. He's trying to run me off the road. I can't outrun him. Maggie felt the hysteria starting to rise. She was going to die tonight. Stay calm. I'm calling the police. Just keep driving. Her car lurched forward into a spin as the larger vehicle slammed into the back. The car came to a stop. Maggie glanced at the passenger window. A scream escaped her lips as metal crashed into metal and her head hit the glass. Then the car was tumbling, falling. Pain erupted from her head, her arm, her stomach, before the darkness took over. Thomas paced back and forth in the waiting room. Maggie's screams, mixed with glass shattering, were permanently embedded in his brain. He checked his watch again. An hour. How much longer? A frail, white-haired woman in a hospital uniform laid her tiny hand on his arm. Would you like some coffee? He offered up a feeble smile. No, thank you. I just wish I knew what was going on. The woman smiled, her thin lips somehow trying to reassure him. You're talking about the young lady that was brought in from the car accident? Yes, ma'am. She's in surgery right now. That's all I know. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thomas patted her pale hand. Thank you. The chirp of his cell phone had the older woman scowling at him. You'll have to take that outside, young man. Thomas nodded, heading towards the ER doors. Ramsey here. I lost him. Thomas gritted his teeth together. Where the hell were you? I tried my best to catch up to the SUV, but I didn't reach them until it was too late. I followed them as far as the county line and lost them. I didn't get a license plate, and I gave a description of the vehicle to the police. I don't care how these people are stopped. He didn't recognize his own voice. I won't rest until Maggie is safe and sound. How is she? In surgery. These stupid people won't tell me anymore. I'll call when I find out who put the hit out on Miss Culvert. Click. Thomas shivered. He had heard those words so often when dealing with clients, he had become numb to them. But to hear them in reference to the woman he loved sent ice over his skin. Sir? The elderly woman from inside stood at the door as queried. The lady from the car accident is out of surgery. The light was so bright. Maggie was sure someone was inside her head, trying to hammer their way out. There wasn't an inch of her body that didn't hurt. Mrs. Culver, can you hear me? I'm Dr. Solomon. Do you remember what happened? Her mouth was so dry. Accident, she croaked. Ran me off the road. The hammer in her head pounded again. You are a very lucky woman. We managed to patch you back together, but you'll be off your feet for a while. Maggie could hear other men talking, and there was a woman somewhere in the room. Her head was too fuzzy and hurt too much to concentrate on what they were saying. Her conversation with Irma rushed over her. It could be morning sickness. With her eyes closed, she could blink away her tears. She had to know. Her right arm inched towards her stomach, brushing against a large bandage. A cry erupted from her throat. A feminine hand moved her hand away. Don't mess with your bandages, sweetie. You don't want to open up the wound. Maggie pulled her hand away to hover over her stomach. Baby? Someone in the room cleared their throat. She knew then that she didn't want to know the truth. Doctor? Yes, ma'am? Am I pregnant now? No, ma'am. Sleep, please. She begged, not caring who was in the room. Thomas stared at the doctor, who seemed to be daring him to ask questions that he knew wouldn't be answered. Had Maggie been pregnant and kept it a secret? Why would she keep such a thing from him? It didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except keeping her safe. If he had to call in every favor his clients owed him, he would, to find out who was behind this wild goose chase. Book 3. Maggie smiled at the almost normal reflection in the mirror. The stitches on the left side of her face would come out in a few more weeks, but the bruises and the swelling had disappeared. The SUV that had run her off the road had been stolen. The police searched the vehicle for clues, but not even a single fingerprint had been found. The trail to find her parents' killer and the culprit behind her car accident had grown cold over the last month. Maggie shook off the feeling of dread that threatened to overwhelm her. The clues have gone cold before, Megs, and you've always managed to pick yourself up and go on with life. The difference being that she'd never had a man standing in her way. And now that the doctor said she was back to normal, it was time to take matters into her own hands. Maggie took a deep breath, grabbed the doorknob to Thomas's home office, and flung open the door. Thomas looked up from his desk and motioned for her to come in. He was deep in conversation with someone, a client, she supposed. She sauntered over to the plush brown leather chair and sat herself down. Maggie wondered if he noticed her bare feet, or the way her royal blue sundress pressed her breasts together, begging to be touched, kissed, caressed. Oh God, it's been almost a month since he's done more than kiss me on the forehead. Surely he's not that much of a saint. Thomas held up a finger to indicate he'd be off the phone in just a minute. Maggie chewed her bottom lip, imagining his fingers on her. The way his touch brought her skin to life. Already she could feel her nipples pressing against the soft cotton of her sundress. "Damn it, Carl, that's not good enough." Thomas stood, pacing the short length of the room, from one side of his mahogany desk to the other. "We have been under constant surveillance since Maggie's accident. What good is it to have clients who are barely walking the straight and narrow if they can't get close to the two thugs that I know are trying to kill us?" Maggie caught his weary gaze. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned, and the tie that normally graced his lawyer uniform was missing. Thomas was falling apart more than she realized. There was only one way to get him to relax, and she was just the woman to help him out. Sitting straight up, Maggie spread her knees as wide as she could, placing her feet flat on the hardwood floor. Her skirt still came down to mid-calf. Reaching up behind her neck, she untied her straps. The top fell forward, exposing her naked flesh to the cool air and Thomas's eager gaze. Maggie reached up to cup her breasts, teasing the hard, pink flesh that had been begging for attention. She pinched, tugged, and rolled the hard nubs, sending waves of pleasure through other parts of her body. Thomas watched and somehow managed to continue talking without changing his tone. Maggie wet her lips, slowly using only the tip of her tongue. Thomas closed his eyes for a second, only to reopen them and continue staring at her half-naked body. "Carl, Mrs. Culver thinks I'm holding her hostage. We have to find out who's behind this and stop them. Have you called in Perolino?" Thomas walked to the front of his desk and sat down on the edge. He was only a few feet away from her chair. Maggie glanced down at his slacks, which made it clear he was anything but immune to her touching herself. He was still way too in control for her pleasure. Placing a finger in her mouth, she sucked it in and out slowly, dragging it back and forth. Her eyes stayed on Thomas's face. Maggie pulled up her skirt, leaned back, and draped her legs over the arm of the chair. She had made it a point not to wear any underwear today. "Yes, I understand that people don't want to talk." Thomas lowered his voice. Maggie sucked on her finger one more time before sliding it between her legs. "I wonder what the guy on the other end of the phone would think if he knew what I was doing right now." Even though she knew she would never perform in front of another person, the fantasy of Thomas claiming her, taking her in front of someone else, seemed to heighten her arousal. Maggie rubbed her sensitive clit and dipped her finger inside her. She tried to show Thomas just how wet she was. "Call me when you have something," Thomas ground out. "I have to go." Maggie watched as he tossed the phone on the desk. Immediately, he was kneeling in front of her, taking her hand from between her legs and sucking her wet fingers into his mouth. Maggie squirmed under his attention. Thomas opened her hand and placed a warm kiss on her palm. "I'm guessing the doctor gave you the all clear to resume any and all physical activity? Or are you trying to cause me permanent injury?" "Yes, he told me to pace myself, but that I am essentially as good as new." Maggie pulled his hand to her breast. "I thought we could try out some of the rooms in this crazy house you've kept me semi-prisoner in for the last few weeks." Thomas moaned. "And you thought we'd start with my office?" His warm, wet mouth wrapped around one hard peak. Maggie caught her breath. She had been dreaming about how they would come together again. The tugging on her breast pulled her stomach tight and sent a new tingle of sensation between her legs. Her hand slid slowly across her thigh, only to be met with Thomas's rough hands. He released her breasts with a loud pop. In moments, both of her feet were on the floor, and her knees were being spread as far as the arms of the chair would allow. Thomas pulled her forward to spread her knees wider, keeping her skirt up around her hips. "I've been wanting to do this for a while." His whisper was so soft, Maggie was sure he was talking to himself. All thoughts fled as his tongue brushed inside her. "Oh God, I'm going to come too quick." His hands held her knees open while his tongue teased and tortured each crevice between her legs. Her fingers entwined in his hair. Maggie could feel her muscles begin to clench. His tongue flicked over her clit, and she was sure she would explode. "Please, oh God." His fingers slid inside her soaking, wet opening, coaxing her to the edge as he began to suck gently on her clit. Maggie grabbed the arms of the chair, her back arching, pressing closer to his mouth and his fingers. A strangled scream escaped as her body shattered into tiny pieces. Then she was floating. No, Thomas was carrying her to the couch at the back of his office. She watched in a haze as Thomas made quick work of his shirt and slacks. She didn't care that her breasts, hips, and thighs were still exposed. She still wanted him, even after the amazing orgasm he had given her. Somewhere in her haze, she heard a foil wrapper. But then Thomas was gathering her in his arms, and his soft lips touched hers. She was amazingly turned on by the taste of her on his lips. His hand moved between her legs, and Maggie opened her thighs. "Are you up for this?" His fingers slipped easily inside her. "I need you inside me more than I need to breathe." Maggie caught his gaze. "I've missed you." She reached to cup his hard length. "Missed this." Thomas groaned before shifting onto her back. She couldn't resist running her hands over his lightly furred chest. The pressure filling her, sliding ever so slowly inside, made her whole body hum. Maggie hooked her heels against his back and pulled herself up. Both of them sucked in their breath. Every time seemed like a perfect fit. Then he began to stroke her. The feeling brought her out of her haze. A new orgasm wave started to build. Thomas thrust over and over. Maggie knew he was about to come. She could feel the tension radiating from his body. She matched him thrust for thrust. Knowing he was so close to the edge sent electricity shattering over her skin. He slammed into her, sending them both over the precipice. Thomas pulled on his boxers and pants. "Well, that was a nice surprise." Maggie sucked in her breath and flinched as she sat up. "Damn, she's hurt. Are you okay? Did I hurt you?" He ran his hands over the stitches on her stomach and her head. He shouldn't have let her entice him. She was still recovering. Maggie slapped his hands away. "I'm fine, just a little stiff. I haven't exactly been running marathons since the car accident." Thomas couldn't resist as he watched her pull her sundress back up. It was certainly nice to see her fighting back. "I take it you haven't found any evidence to convict my parents' killers?" She smoothed her skirt down. Frustration returned full force. Could he keep lying to her? How could he look for evidence and keep them both safe? He had been trying to simply prove who was behind the wheel of the SUV that had run her off the road and nearly killed her. No. "You know what it's going to come down to, right?" She raised both eyebrows at him. Thomas took a deep breath. "Why don't we see where my private investigator gets to?" He stepped towards her, unable to resist the urge to take her in his arms. His mood darkened as she backed away from him. Great. Now her feathers are ruffled. "We already know where they've ended up. The trail disappears." Maggie began pacing the length of the small room. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck. Having his emotions travel up and down like a roller coaster was beginning to take a toll on him. "What do you want me to do?" His gut roiled with the very thought that he was going to have to choose who lived and who died in this whole scenario. Maggie stopped and caught his gaze. "If your brother testifies to what he witnessed, then they'll have to put the men behind bars." Her voice became so soft, he almost thought it was a dream. "So this is what it comes to. I have to choose between you and my brother. Because quite honestly, the mob is not the sort to let things go unfinished." He waited for her to say he was right, or maybe that she couldn't ask him to do it, but Maggie remained silent. "Baby, I know that you want justice, but at what price?" Thomas couldn't keep the lump out of his throat. "You were almost killed when your car flipped. We lost." His arm lifted of his own accord towards her stomach. Maggie swatted his hand away. "Stop it!" she growled. "We don't know if I was ever pregnant, so don't go down that road." A small river of anger flowed through Thomas's stomach. "We would have known if you would have let the doctor tell us." "Why?" Maggie all but screamed. What good would it have done to know if there was a baby that didn't survive? None. It would have only made my recovery more difficult, maybe even impossible. His chest felt like someone reached inside and twisted all of the air out of his lungs. "Maggie, can we move on from this? You can go back to your nursing job. I can go back to my practice. We can start over." "I don't want to start over." Thomas watched in amazement as Maggie punched the wall. Her hand bounced off the surface, not leaving the tiniest of dents. Blood trickled over her knuckles. Thomas shook his head before wrapping his arms around her frail body. Her arms were cold, so he tried to pull her closer, sharing his warmth. Her hair smelled of the sweet essence of coconut. "Do you feel better now?" His voice was low. Thomas knew he had to diffuse her anger. "No," she sniffed. "My hand hurts like hell." "Let's get you some ice." "I'm not giving up on getting my parents' murderers put behind bars." Thomas was grateful that Maggie allowed him to keep an arm around her as they made their way to the kitchen. He took time to calm the knot of fear in his chest as he filled a plastic baggie with ice and sealed it. Maggie closed and opened her hand. Now that she was alone, she could examine the full extent of the damage. Much to her relief, nothing appeared to be broken. Why does he make me so mad? Probably because I've let him back in my heart since he's been taking care of me. Time to go home. She had agreed to letting one of Thomas's bodyguards drive her home, while Thomas had to head out to some important meetings with one of his clients. I still don't see how he became a criminal defense lawyer after knowing Mom and Dad before they were killed. A shudder ran through her body. She glanced up to see if Bob had noticed. His eyes were on the road. The familiar, nondescript brick apartment building was a refreshing change from the fortress estate that Thomas called home. Waving off Bob, Maggie turned the key in the lock and headed inside. It was much tidier than when she left. Blankets were folded, the dishes in the sink were gone. She couldn't resist a smile. Irma must have done more than dump out the refrigerator. Maggie knew that certain things needed to be taken care of while she was recovering at Thomas's, so a fellow nurse from the hospital, Irma, had volunteered to clean things up. The one bedroom with all beige interior hadn't been this clean since the day Maggie moved in. Had that only been a few months ago? Dropping her suitcase in the middle of the living room floor, Maggie plopped herself on the bright pinks and reds of the floral patterned loveseat. Closing her eyes, she could still feel the brush of Thomas's fingers against her overly sensitive skin. Her heart quickened and blood rushed to other sensitive parts of her body. The loud trill of a cell phone invaded her heated daydreams. "Hello?" I told you to call me to let me know you made it home in one piece. Maggie was sure she could see Thomas rubbing the back of his neck through the phone. That made her smile. I literally just sat down. Besides, I'm sure your gorilla-like bodyguard called you the moment I closed the door. That's besides the point. How do I know there wasn't someone waiting inside for you? There's no one here but me. You are a real worrywart. You know that? Only because I love you, he rasped. The words were uttered so easily, but the awkwardness grew in the following silence, until Maggie was sure Thomas knew how uncomfortable it made her for him to say that. I have a deposition in 5 minutes. What are your plans for the rest of the day? Maggie took a deep breath. Irma is coming by in an hour to walk me to the store. This place is empty of almost everything. Be careful. I'll call you tonight. Any other advice, Mr. Worrywart? Don't go anywhere alone. Maggie chuckled. I'm hanging up now. Go figure out how to make your client look innocent. Thomas looked at his watch for what had been the 100th time in the past hour, 9 p.m. He was used to late nights, but he hated knowing that Maggie was home alone. Are we keeping you from an appointment, Mr. Ramsey? The burly, gray-haired man across the table scratched his chin. Glancing around the table at the half-dozen other men, Thomas knew he wasn't any good to anyone. Not exactly, Sam. It's my girlfriend. She hasn't been out of the hospital long, and this is the first night I've been away. Thomas watched as the man who was a half a head taller than him and twice his size stood up abruptly. Well, gents. Sam swept his arm towards the door. This can wait till tomorrow. Let's head over to the Blue Buffalo for a drink and let this man get home to his lady friend. Feeling a bit blindsided, Thomas jumped to his feet and offered his hand to the known mobster. A large smile crossed Sam's face as he clasped Thomas's hand with more than average grip. Give the beautiful lady my best. Thanks. Suspicion nagged at the back of his head. But how did you know she was beautiful? Sam laughed. Always on edge. He placed a meaty hand on Thomas's shoulder. If I, in my age and size, can find a beautiful woman to warm my bed because of my bank account, then you, my friend, should have them crawling over each other to get to you. Thomas felt the tension on his shoulders ebb, leaving him feeling more like Jell-O. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 2. Sam was already halfway out of the conference room door. Sounds good. The moment the room was empty, Thomas locked the door and dialed Maggie. He could still smell the sweetness of her hair and the soft curve of her lips from this morning. Hello? Her sleepy, throaty voice sent his tightly wound body into overdrive. Hey, sexy. How are you feeling? Pretty good, since I took my pain pills. I think I overdid it today. Should have waited till tomorrow to tackle grocery shopping. Thomas shook his head. Stubborn woman. I told you that you were welcome to stay at the house. A heavy sigh traveled through the phone. New topic. Now it was his turn to smile. Okay, how about I come over and keep you warm tonight? As much as I'd like that, I'll probably be out like a light in about a half an hour. What if I keep you up while I drive over there? Thomas was already grabbing his coat and heading to the parking deck. How do you propose to do that? Her murmuring clued him in on her being closer to falling asleep than she indicated. What are you wearing? Thomas unlocked the door to his BMW and slid into the black leather seat. A pink tank top and white sweatpants? She chuckled. Are you turned on yet? Thomas focused on the road in front of him. Are you wearing a bra? Uh, I'm in bed, silly. He swallowed hard. I want you to touch yourself. Make yourself ready for when I get there. I don't know. Use your free hand to imitate what I tell you. Okay. Her voice was so quiet, Thomas barely heard her. If I were there beside you, I would massage your soft, tender breasts. My lips brush over your collarbone, your chest, your luscious pink nipples. Touch them, Maggie. Pull on them. Brush your fingertips over them. The light turned red, and he stepped on the brake a little harder than necessary. He could hear her breathing coming faster. Are they hard, baby? Yes. Her breathlessness sent blood straight to his groin. This is where I kiss my way down to your stomach, slipping my hand underneath your waistband and your panties. You're so beautiful, Maggie. Slip your fingers between your legs. Stroke yourself. Are you wet for me? Oh, yes. Focus, Thomas. Focus on the road and the cars in front of you. Almost there. Stroke deeper. Thomas, you're making me crazy. He had heard that tone before. She was close to coming, and if he stayed on the phone listening to her erotic moans, then he wouldn't be far behind. In seconds, he pulled into a parking spot, locked the car doors, and headed up to her apartment. Baby, I'm almost to your door. Come open it for me. Thomas clicked the phone off and shoved it in his jacket pocket. Maggie opened the door, wearing nothing more than a dazed and fully aroused look. He pushed her back into the apartment, taking the moment to look over her hard nipples and red-blotched skin. Thomas shifted his painful erection in his pants. No sooner was the door locked that both he and Maggie were stripping off his clothes. Nothing more entered his mind as his skin met hers. Hands and mouths were everywhere. He grabbed her thighs around his waist and plunged into her. Her body tightened, immediately causing her to scream out, but he couldn't stop, couldn't wait. Pressing her up against the wall, his need was totally animalistic, not stopping until Maggie had come again, and he exploded inside her. Hours had passed, and Maggie just stared at the ice cube-like package. Only the kitchen light was on, leaving the rest of the apartment in darkness. And the cold cut so deep. Maggie was sure that even her bones hurt from it. The square package with the plain brown wrapper had arrived while Irma had been helping her put away the groceries. Irma swore the package was from her secret admirer, the handsome gentleman that had been asking around the hospital for her. The very idea sent a shiver of fear down her spine. Her whole body warred with what she should or shouldn't do. The police in this town had already pegged her as crazy because she wouldn't drop an almost 30-year-old murder. Would they laugh at the fact that she was afraid to touch the package after realizing there was no address? The thick paper had nothing more than her name scrawled across the top. Where have I seen that writing before? Ah, yes, the note attached to my door at the hotel. The same man that's been dropping the breadcrumbs about my parents' murder and led me straight to Thomas Ramsey. And heartache. Her phone rang again and again. Maggie was paralyzed. Her mind was focused solely on the package. The fourth set of rings set her into motion. Launching towards the package, Maggie ripped at the paper. She no longer cared if it was a clue or even a bomb. If she died in this moment, then so be it. The not knowing was almost as bad as knowing and not being able to do anything about it. Maggie took a deep breath and opened the box. Inside was a DVD. Almost without thought, her body moved towards the DVD player, switching on all of the buttons to make the television come alive. On the screen were several men watching a woman hanging by her arms from a rope that disappeared to the top of the screen. The woman was being tortured, her screams muffled by something in her mouth. Maggie squinted at the screen, hoping to make out the faces of the men who seemed to be enjoying the young woman's degradation. One of the men, with their backs to the camera, turned. Maggie sucked in a startled breath. No. Her heart twisted. Thomas, no. She stumbled backwards. Her knees collided with the coffee table, causing her to sink straight down on top of it. She gripped her hands together, fighting the panic attack that threatened to overwhelm her. He's as bad as the men he defends. Maggie couldn't tear her gaze away from the poor woman and her torturers. Thomas stood in a tuxedo like the others, with a drink in hand, laughing at something the other man was saying. It was then that she noticed two others on the screen. Seth Corded and Dave Hedger. The men that killed my... Bam, 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 bam! Maggie's heart jumped into her throat as she scrambled to her feet. Maggie, open up! Thomas's voice carried through the dimly lit apartment. The tears trickled down her cheeks, making them colder. Go away! Maggie hated the fear in her voice. I don't want you here! Baby, open the door. I just want to make sure you're okay. He sounded sincere enough, but the images on the screen showed her what kind of man Thomas Ramsey really was. Maggie forced herself to move towards the kitchen. Baby, I can't leave unless I know you're safe. Maggie reached for the knife block and removed the larger of the carving knives. She carefully put the knife behind her back and moved to answer the door. Maggie barely had the door open, and Thomas rushed in, forcing her to take several steps back in order to conceal the knife. Maggie watched as his eyes searched every inch of the room. Maggie, baby, you won't believe the horrible things that went through my mind when you wouldn't answer the phone. This Thomas looked like a hybrid of the man who she still loved and the monster still noticeable on the television screen. He was dressed immaculately in his dark-colored Armani suit and looked like he had stepped right out of a high-profile trial. But the sheer terror showed that he was truly worried about her. Did that matter now? How could she be with a man who not only allowed but seemed to enjoy women being tortured? Maggie. His hand extended towards her, causing Maggie to shrink away. The painful, muffled screams from the television filled the room. Thomas didn't seem to hear them. His eyes stayed on her. Maggie pointed to the television behind him. Slowly, he turned his head towards the only other light in the room. I got that DVD delivered while I was out. Her voice sounded foreign to her. She adjusted her hold on the knife. Thomas walked closer to the glowing box, never taking his eyes off the screen. Maggie watched in confusion as he crumbled to the floor. It was a test. His voice was devoid of emotion as he stared only at the screen. A test for my client to see how loyal I was as an attorney. He invited me to his house for a black tie affair that deemed a necessary test in his line of work. His hand rubbed the back of his neck. I joked that if I saw him kill someone that I would have to report it. I had no idea this is what he had in mind. Her stomach felt like lead. Why didn't you stop it? Or was this client worth that woman's life? He looked at her then. She could see the hurt in his eyes. Of course not. Then why? They would have killed both of us, me and the woman. There were enough mob connections in that room that night that they wouldn't have even blinked when they shot us. It would have been business as usual, and maybe a bit of being disgruntled, because they would have had to have found a new lawyer. If you knew it was being taped, why didn't you? I didn't. It wasn't until the end of the party that my client invited me down for a private viewing. Thomas reached up and stopped the DVD. It was then that he made it very clear to me that if I double-crossed him, the DVD would make its way into the hands of several judges that would be less happy with my conduct. They would make sure the DVD was edited to show only myself and the woman present. Maggie wasn't sure how much time passed. Everything was in slow motion. The next few moments, the ones in which she decided whether or not she believed him, would consist of one decision which would drastically change her life forever. She stared into his eyes, searching for the right answers. I so want to believe you. Somewhere deep inside, she knew he was telling the truth, but there were just too many secrets now. Maggie let her arm holding the knife drop to her side. She had no intentions of using, and hoped that Thomas didn't push her. His gaze dropped to the knife, and Maggie watched as his eyes widened. Maggie? You have to go now, Thomas. She forced the words through the tightness in her throat. He stood and approached her like she was a frightened animal. Stop, she said louder. Don't make this worse than this has to be. If you truly love me, you'll go. If that's the way you want it. The moment the door clicked shut, Maggie's knees buckled, sending her half falling to the floor. The tears poured forth onto her hands and thighs as deep, guttural sobs racked her body. Book 4. Maggie gripped the cold steering wheel of her rental car. The blue Camry hadn't been her first choice, but it suited her needs. Having only just started driving again last week, Maggie was more than a little shaky. What no one bothered to tell her was that once you've been in a car accident, it took a lot of courage to get back behind the wheel. A black SUV turned in front of her. Could that be the one that ran me off the road a few months ago? What if they know I'm going to the prison to meet with Larry? Pull yourself together, Megs. There's no reason for them to know. She took a few deep breaths as the light turned green and her foot slid to the gas pedal. Maggie knew that a panic attack was only moments away if she didn't get her mind back on track. She was finally going to meet with the sole witness to her parents' murder, and nothing was going to get in the way. Distraction, she muttered into an empty car. Think about something positive. She smiled. The only positive thing about her life since she moved back to her hometown of Stony Brook was Thomas Ramsey. Okay, she was still a bit confused as to where he stood in her life. They had both admitted they loved each other, but he kept hiding things from her, like the fact that his brother had witnessed her parents' murder, or that he was an attorney for mobsters that made him watch a woman being tortured in order to prove his loyalty. He had sworn that keeping secrets was his way of trying to keep her safe, but she had been hurt too many times, and trust was hard to come by. The problem was that both her heart and her body betrayed her when it came to Thomas. Just thinking about his bedroom eyes had her all hot and bothered. It had been over a week since she kicked him out of her apartment, and self-satisfaction in the bedroom was no substitute for the real thing. The long drive to the state prison certainly gave her time to relive one of their more outrageous escapades. Thomas handed her a glass of wine before grabbing one of his own. Maggie held the glass oh so elegantly in front of her cleavage. The strapless black dress made its way to her ankles while pressing her breasts together and upwards in a rather daring display. His gaze immediately dropped to where the glass hovered. His chestnut brown eyes darkened with desire. Maggie glanced around before whispering, If you keep looking at me like that, we won't make it out of here with our clothes still on. He moved to a place alight, teasing hand on the back of her neck. His touch lit her sensitive skin with small tendrils of fire. Thomas's warm breath on her ear sent her pulse into overdrive. Now wouldn't that be a show? He whispered into the shell of her ear. I could take you to the middle of the museum, release the pins from your beautiful smelling hair. And as you shake out your golden curls, I would ease the zipper down your dress until it fell to the floor, leaving you standing on display only in your underwear. Maggie couldn't keep her eyes from closing or from imagining his fantasy as his hands caressed the back of her neck. She could almost feel the cool air on her naked thighs. Thomas. I would peel off your underwear, spreading kisses over each and every inch of your most sensitive parts, your neck, tops of your breasts, your rosy nipples. She knew he could hear her breathing quicken. You would be completely naked, except for your high heels. Every person in the room would be enraptured by your beauty and unable to take their eyes away from you. With a little coaxing, I would get you to spread your legs apart so that I can kneel in front of you and see just how wet you are. As everyone watched, I would run my fingers over your sweet little opening, listening to you moan and whimper. You're so close, I can feel it. I begin to lick your clit while fucking you with my fingers. Maggie opened her eyes. No one was looking at her. Everyone was talking and laughing. She chewed on her bottom lip and shifted as she felt the wetness on her thighs. But Thomas wasn't through. You come so hard on my fingers and my mouth that your scream echoes through the gallery. Maggie could actually feel a tightness in her lower region and knew that someone else surely had to realize that she was so turned on. Her nipples rubbed against the silk of her dress. The emptiness inside her was the only thing keeping her from coming. Thomas caught her gaze, and Maggie knew he was as turned on as she was. He raised an eyebrow, and it was as if she could read the question on his face. She nodded, since she didn't trust her voice to work. He took her glass and set them both on the nearby table. Maggie wrapped an arm through his elbow as he escorted her briskly through the gallery to the storage warehouse area. Maggie didn't question where he was taking her. All she wanted was to be with him. Thomas was searching for something, pulling her behind at almost a run. They reached a wooden desk in the corner, neatly stacked with paperwork. Thomas grabbed her by the hips and sat her on the desk. Maggie scooted back, hiked up her skirt, and placed her heels on the desk, leaving her spread eagle for his enjoyment. The cool air on her hot, naked flesh sent a new shiver of excitement through her body. She propped herself up on her elbows. Thomas had unbuttoned his black dress slacks and freed his large, swollen member. That's what I need. Maggie licked her lips, trying to convey just how ready she was. Thomas stepped closer, rubbing his hand between her legs. His fingers rubbed her juices all over her swollen clit. Maggie sucked in a breath as her muscles clenched. Half a second passed before he pushed into her. She came so hard she couldn't catch her breath, but Thomas didn't stop. He plunged into her faster, harder. Maggie wrapped her legs around him, locking her ankles. Paper scattered across the floor as the desk shook. Thomas brushed his thumb over her clit, sending Maggie spiraling over the edge again. It was then that Thomas took his own release, grabbing onto her hips and pressing as deeply as he could go. The memory left Maggie's mind, warring with her body. Let it go, Megs. You've waited way too long to find out what happened that night. The long walk through the cool, windy parking lot of the prison helped to ease the heat in her body and to clear her head. Her heart had always been a luxury that got in the way. She could only hope that Larry wasn't inviting her to the prison to tell her to back down. A man sitting on the other side of the glass held only a faint resemblance of the man she loved. Where Thomas's hair was dark, this man's was gray. She knew he was only 12 years older than Thomas, but he could easily have passed for Thomas's father. Picking up the phone, she swallowed down her fear. Larry shook his head. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever had the pleasure of knowing." "You don't know me." Maggie kept her voice level. "Non-issue. What is an issue is the fact that you are going to get my brother killed." The edge in his voice stabbed at her heart. "I told him I didn't need his help. I can't let my parents' murderers go free." She pushed back the lump in her throat. "So you'll be happy to see them behind bars, even if it means you and my brother will die in the process?" "Damn. What happens if the two of you disappear and the killers go free for all of it? What does your life mean, Miss Culver? Do you think your parents would have wanted you to spend your entire life being unhappy? Is that why I saved your life? So you could waste it?" That got her attention. "Save my what? What are you talking about?" "So Thomas didn't tell you?" "Tell me what? More secrets." "I helped Seth and Dave break into your parents' house. The plan I knew about was to rob the house. Seth and Dave decided to up their game to murder." "You've already opened your mouth. You might as well explain how you saved my life that night." Maggie steeled herself for the truth she had waited so long for. Larry curled his lip into a sneer. "After they killed your dad, Seth dragged your mother into the bedroom for a little one-on-one. That's when Dave told me to help find you. The way he was fondling his hunting knife, I knew he was ready to practice his gutting skills. So I found you first and hid you." Her heart stopped. At least that's the way the pain in her chest felt. Surely she couldn't still be breathing after hearing about her mother's last moments. "Happy now? Are you ready to stop this nonsense and get on with your life?" "Why don't you tell the police what happened? You saved my life." Maggie was surprised her voice worked at all. "I was a kid who was terrified of going to jail, and now I've got nothing to lose. Just don't expect me to testify. The moment Seth or David is arrested would see me hanging at the end of a rope or fallen victim to some other type of accident. It would only piss them off further." Maggie nodded, the images in her head swirling around like some bad movie. She had to get out of there. She couldn't breathe. The photos in her mind played in her head as if she had been a witness to that night. "Pick up the phone, damn it!" Maggie pulled up to Thomas's gate and clicked her cell phone off. A moment later, the car door was being ripped open by a large, heavy-set man in a dark suit. "You need to come with me, Miss Culver." His booming voice left little room for arguing. "Thomas Ramsey will know where to look for me if I don't come back by nightfall." A largely meaty hand clamped down on her arm. "Mr. Ramsey is already waiting for you." Thomas really wished he had called in a few more favors. Looking around, he was pretty sure they were in a warehouse somewhere. The boxes lining one of the walls weren't labeled, so wherever they were wasn't a legitimate business. Thomas didn't recognize any of the men with the automatic weapons, but mob guys always had a few disposable hired hands hanging around. The zip ties on his wrists had begun to bite into his flesh about a half an hour ago. He only knew that because of the clock on the far left wall over what appeared to be an office. They were going to kill him. If that, he was certain. Thomas just wasn't sure why they were waiting. They hadn't asked him any questions. Just tied him to the wooden chair and smacked him in the head a few times. The pain in his left temple still throbbed. Closing his eyes, Thomas let himself remember one of the last times he held Maggie in his arms. They lay curled up, skin to skin, on a lounge chair by his pool. The stars appeared by the hundreds. A light blanket was draped over them to hide their nakedness from the prying eyes of his staff. Thomas knew that it was after midnight, but Maggie had insisted on the blanket. His hand rested on her breast, her back pressed to his chest, and his growing erection pressed between her butt cheeks. They had already made love inside and outside of the pool, but the softness of her skin and the smell of sweet coconut in her hair made him eager for more. Maggie responded eagerly to his searching hand by pressing her hips back against him. Thomas pulled her thigh up, spreading her for his hand to dip into her wetness. Then he flipped over, pressing him onto his back. A few strokes of her hand and a flick of her tongue over his hard length had Thomas almost begging her to ride him. Maggie must have read his mind. A teasing grin flashed across her face before she straddled him, sliding over every hard inch. "Hey, Ramsey!" A rough, masculine voice brought Thomas crashing back to reality. Never again would he kiss those soft, full lips or touch her satin skin. "No falling asleep over there, Ramsey. We have a surprise for you." Sitting up straighter, Thomas tried to adjust the growing pain in his pants. The last thing he needed in this situation was an erection. I'm going. The familiar female voice sent ice through his heart. "What's she doing here? This has nothing to do with her." Thomas used his best courtroom voice, trying to be convincing, although he knew exactly why she was there. They were going to kill them both and get rid of the loose ends. "Thomas!" Maggie ran to him, her hands running all over him, examining his face with soft, gentle touches. "What did they do to you? Are you okay?" The concern in her eyes was almost his undoing. The fact that they hadn't seen each other in several weeks and were both about to die left regret heavy on his heart. Why couldn't they have met in different circumstances? "I'm fine." The chill in his voice had stopped cold-blooded killers in mid-sentence, but it went right over Maggie's head. She continued running her hands over his shoulders and his arms, as if searching for broken bones. "I said I'm fine," he barked. Hurt flashed in her eyes, but she quickly hid it. The larger man of the group, the one they called Sid, grabbed Maggie by the arm and pulled her down into the chair. As she squirmed and fought, Sid bound her hands behind her back and her ankles to the legs of the chair. Thomas took a deep breath, trying to figure out the best way to get them both out of there alive. He had been ready to die himself, but he couldn't bear the thought of something happening to Maggie. First, he had to get free. Then he would figure out how to get past Sid and the 4 men with guns. He nodded towards the only woman in the room. "Now that you got what you came for, you can let me go," Thomas demanded. "I don't believe that Alan Chambers will be too thrilled to hear his attorney has disappeared." Sid glanced at him. "The boss says I'm hanging on to both of you." His eyes moved over to Maggie. "Although she seems much more fun, and a hell of a sight better to look at." Thomas refused to let Sid goad him into doing or saying something he'd regret, although he was pretty sure he drew blood as he pulled at the ties around his wrists. He was surprised at how calm his voice was. "Do what you want with the woman, but I think you need to have a long talk with your boss about my role in any of this. If I go missing for too long, there will be a lot of important, influential, and dangerous people that would be rather upset." Sid crossed his bulging arms. "I'm sure someone will be missing her." Thomas laughed. "No one gives a damn about that nosy, cold-hearted bitch. I'll be glad to get rid of her." Maggie flinched as if she'd been hit. He'd make it up later to her. Right now, he had to get her out of danger. "Thomas loves you, Maggie. You know he loves you." It still hurt to hear the words come out of his mouth, the same words that had bounced off of her from numerous lovers. Looking around, she noticed the automatic weapons and the fact that Thomas was clearly outnumbered. She wouldn't be much help even if she wasn't strapped to the chair. The way the men were looking at her, it wouldn't surprise her in the least if they were planning on a little party before they killed her off. Maggie blocked out Thomas's continued derogatory remarks about her character as she decided it was time to take matters into her own hands. Spreading her knees as wide as her confined ankles allowed, Maggie squirmed, inching up her black pencil skirt. "Hey, Baldy!" She turned on her most seductive voice. "Mr. Stuffed Shirt over there may not be interested in what I have to offer, but I'm sure you'd be more than happy to have a little fun." A smile grew on Sid's face. "Well, well, well, you certainly are more accommodating than the last girl we had tied up." "Go for it, Megs. I happen to like being tied up. It gets me horny." Looking anywhere but at Thomas's face, she noticed that the other men were coming closer, trying to get a better look up her skirt most likely. She had experience in faking it. Now was the time to really turn up the sex appeal. Here's to hoping Thomas can make the most of my distraction before I have to screw every guy in the building. I hope a room full of people doesn't give you performance anxiety. Maggie ran her tongue over her lips. Sid stood between her open thighs. His hand reached down and twisted tightly in her hair. Tears sprung to her eyes, but she somehow managed to turn the scream of pain into a moan of pleasure. Her head was pulled back, forcing her to look directly into Sid's cold blue eyes. She forced a slow, seductive smile. Sid tightened his hand in her hair. "How do I know you're not just putting on an act so that you can get away?" So glad I didn't go home and change. If I'm acting, then why are my panties so wet? Sid kept his grip on her hair. Maggie forced herself to relax as the large, calloused hand ripped open her blouse and grabbed her breast, twisting it painfully. Thomas tried his best to ignore what was happening just a few yards away. Maggie had garnered the attention of every man in the place, giving him time to loosen the binds on his wrists. The adrenaline from seeing another man's hands on her coursed through his veins, giving him strength he didn't realize he had. There was no way he was overpowering all of the men to get both of them out alive. Getting a hold of one of their guns was the best way out. How to do that was the problem. Maggie's seductive voice interrupted his thoughts. "I don't mind everyone watching, but you'll be able to see better if there's a table nearby." A loud roar went up among the guys as they cleared off a nearby folding table. His heart nearly stopped when Sid released her binds and moved his knife to her skirt. His knife made quick work of the cotton fabric before moving to her bra. "No!" his mind screamed. Thomas bit down on his tongue so hard he tasted blood. The entire group moved together. All but one of the men dropped their guns nearby. He couldn't see Maggie any longer, but the words, "Now who's first?" would echo through his mind forever. Thomas moved swiftly and quietly across the floor, snatching up the nearest gun. He shot first without any warning. The men tumbled one by one, all except Sid. The bullet only got his shoulder. Maggie rolled onto the floor. The next few moments seemed to go in slow motion as Sid lunged for them. Thomas threw the empty gun and dashed around the table for a naked, trembling Maggie. The pair bolted around the warehouse boxes as Sid followed close behind. Bullets whizzed by his head. The doors led them to a vacant parking lot. Thomas had no idea where they were, but he knew they couldn't stay put. He grabbed Maggie's hand and dragged her towards the road. Sid was no longer shooting at them. A quick glance showed the larger man sliding into a black pickup truck. Damn! A quick-moving red sports car blocked their exit. What the hell? Thomas pushed Maggie behind him, stripping off his shirt. Put this on. A short, round man emerged from the car. The pistol in his hand was anything but welcoming. "She's willing to drop it, Seth." Thomas was surprised at the force in his voice. A short man smiled. "Now why would I believe that? First she's stalking you, then she's screwing you, then she claims to hate you." "He's right." Maggie's voice echoed the trembling he felt from her body. "I'm ready to move on with my life." Seth laughed. "You're the same tease your mother was. Her mouth said one thing while her body said another." Maggie's nails dug into his waist. Thomas could only imagine the pain those words evoked. "You two are a pain in the ass," Seth scoffed. He raised the gun and shot. "No!" Maggie screamed as pain ripped through Thomas's left leg, sending him straight to the ground. Maggie tried her best to catch him, but Thomas was too big. There was so much blood. "I have to stop the bleeding." Nothing else mattered as she pulled his belt off and tried to fasten it around the upper part of his leg. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I never meant for you to get hurt." She wasn't even aware of her tears until they hit the tops of her hands. "Hey," Thomas's voice was pained. "Whatever happens, I love you. I don't regret a moment we spent together." A shadow fell over them. "Isn't that sweet? I might get all choked up." Seth's contempt was almost a visible thing. A flash of light caught Maggie's attention. A piece of broken glass about the size of her hand lay at Thomas's shoulder. It's now or never. Leaning over, her hand wrapped around the glass as her lips brushed his. "I love you. No more secrets. No more lies." Seth pulled her hair. "Get up, bitch." Maggie whirled, slamming the glass up into the large stomach facing her. She barely felt her hand slice open. The gun went off. Pain grazed her face. Maggie's swift motion left Seth on his back and her on top, stabbing him over and over again. Another gunshot sounded, bringing Maggie out of her trance-like state. Then she was being pulled away. Her instincts were to run, to fight, but she couldn't feel her limbs. Everything was a haze, and her body refused to listen to her commands. Thomas hated being confined to a bed. He couldn't get the image of Maggie out of his head. While she had been stabbing Seth, he had grabbed and dropped the pistol and taken out Sid. It was then he had found Seth's cell phone and called 911. With nothing left to do but wait, he had pulled Maggie into his lap and tried his best to keep her in the present. The last he saw of her was when they were being loaded into separate ambulances. The police had interrogated him the entire trip to the hospital. Thankfully, they had enough evidence to hook David to their kidnapping and attempted murder. He would be going away for a long time. If it was up to Thomas, then David would be having his own little accident while incarcerated. But that didn't change the fact that it had been almost an entire day, and he still hadn't heard what condition Maggie was in. "Hey." A soft feminine voice washed over him, filling his heart with more love than he knew existed. There stood Maggie, in the doorway of his room. A bandage on her hand and the side of her head were the only real indications of the nightmare that had happened just a day before. She wore loose-fitting emerald green sweatpants and a matching sweatshirt. A sheepish smile mirrored the shy look she shot him. "They wouldn't tell me anything about your condition, so I decided to find you myself." Thomas couldn't stop himself from smiling. "How about you? Are you okay?" She nodded, moving further into the room. "How's your leg?" "Doc says I'll be up and around in another day or so. They had to cut my leg open and get the bullet out, so I'll be on crutches for a while. Guess we're lucky it didn't go through your leg." Maggie shook her head. Her delicate hands were warm as they covered Thomas's hand. "You saved my life." "We saved each other." He didn't want to remind her about killing Seth. Tears dripped down onto his hands. "Maggie, baby, don't cry. It's over now. It's all over." "What about the other man?" "Dave? The police have him behind bars. They found audio and video of Seth and Dave planning our demise. Seems Dave didn't trust Seth to not turn on him, so he recorded all of their meetings. That and all the drugs they found on the property are more than enough to keep old Dave behind bars for the rest of his life." No more tears fell, and the silence grew between them. He squeezed her hand. "You know I did it for us, right?" The words were so faint he had to strain to hear them. Thomas pushed the button to set the bed up. Maggie looked up, her eyes a mixture of pain and pleading. "I came onto those men, pretended to like them touching me, so they would forget you were even in the room." Thomas offered her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "I know, baby. All of it was an act. It mortified me." "You saved us, sweetheart. Your plan worked exactly like you wanted it to. I would give anything to erase those memories for you." He wanted to erase those memories from his own mind as well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sid tearing Maggie's panties from her, or lying naked on the folding table with his hands all over her body. "I'm just glad that I got to you before things went any further." "Me too." Thomas slid a hand behind her neck and pulled her to him. His lips brushed hers gently, promising more. "Think you'll be up for a June wedding?" Maggie sat curled up to Thomas's good side on the king-size bed. They were both dressed in flannel pajamas, she in the top and him in the bottoms. Their bandages were gone, but she was still in therapy for her hand, and he was for his leg. Thomas kissed the top of her head, causing her to snuggle closer to his naked chest. "Of course. The doc says the cane is only temporary. Then again, he tells me to stay off my leg at least 4 days a week." "You should really follow the doctor's orders." Maggie straddled his waist. Her panties had been discarded earlier during one of their marathon lovemaking sessions, leaving her exposed to the erotic feel of the flannel fabric against her most sensitive parts. A crooked grin appeared on Thomas's face. "Are you my distraction to keep me off my feet?" "Maybe." Her hands went to the top button of her pajamas. "You do like me on top." Her hips ground against the growing bulge underneath her. Thomas moved his hands to her hips. Maggie groaned in approval of his skin against hers. Leaning forward, she brushed her lips against his. "Thomas," he opened his mouth, his tongue brushing her lips. Maggie allowed herself to be lost in the sensation of his tongue against hers, his mouth caressing hers. Every time he kissed her seemed like the first time. Excitement flowed over her breasts and down to her belly. "I love you," he whispered. Maggie leaned back. "You're the only man I've ever loved. I trust you with my body and my heart." His hands skimmed over her breasts, her shoulders. "As much as I love your body, I'm glad I have your heart." "Always." She slid the pajama top off her shoulders. "Do you know how beautiful you are?" Thomas pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Maggie fought the urge to squirm as his kisses traveled across her collarbone, down her chest, to the valley between her breasts. She watched as his tongue touched her nipples, circling them, teasing her. His eyes met hers just before his mouth descended on one erect peak. The slow rhythm was almost reverent. A whirlwind of emotions mixed with soft touches and kisses all over her body. Maggie found herself naked, on her back with Thomas above her. Mouths and hands blended together in a night that neither of them would forget. As Thomas slid carefully into her tight, wet center, Maggie felt the tears come. Each stroke brought them closer together, physically, mentally, emotionally. As she came, she felt Thomas's own release. With each spasm, she released the past, released the anger and the fear, and ultimately released her full heart to be loved. The end. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of Devour, Criminal Defense Attorney Romance, complete series by Lucia Jordan, narrated by Layla Vassal. This audiobook was produced by Wild Hearts Romance. To keep up with new releases, visit wildheartsromance.com. All rights reserved. For your listening pleasure, enjoy a bonus chapter of Undone by Lucia Jordan. Undone was produced by Wild Hearts Romance. Visit wildheartsromance.com today to sign up for weekly emails stuffed with free and discount titles from best-selling romance authors. Book 1. Accident on Main and Pennsylvania Ave. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio, and Dustin turned the ambulance towards Main Street. Gia reached up with a long, slender arm and used a short, pink-painted fingernail to flip the switch that turned on the flashing lights. Other cars began to give way, and soon they were speeding along, making good time to the accident they'd been called to. For Gia, life as an EMT was perfect. She loved the rush of saving a life more than anything. And in fact, her addiction to the rush she received from her job had led her to create a life that revolved around work, leaving very little in the way of a private life. Her burly, jolly partner, Dustin, was always teasing her for her lack of love life. But the truth was, he was exactly the same. They both worked much too hard, but had no idea what else they might want to do with their time. Instead of trying to cultivate private lives, which they'd come to believe would never be as exciting as their work, they simply worked the longer shifts, spending so much time in the ambulance that Gia often felt it was more her home than the little apartment she used mostly for brief stints of sleep and the occasional weekend spent relaxing and recovering from the week. "This one doesn't look so bad," Dustin said. "Only one car." He sounded relieved as they approached the intersection where the accident was causing backup and confusion in every direction. The final approach was slow as cars moved out of the way, despite the thick traffic. "Maybe this is just a quick transport to check for whiplash," he said hopefully. Dustin hated to see people seriously injured. He hadn't gotten quite as good at disconnecting from it as Gia had. Even though she hated seeing people in pain, or worse, in the throes of death, she had learned to put her fear and sorrow in little boxes that she never opened again. She forgot the faces and the names of the people who had died in their care, just as she also forgot the names and faces of the dozens of people she'd saved. Dustin was much more sensitive, his big, strong exterior hiding a soft heart. This was a fact that silently amused Gia and made her love Dustin like an older brother. They almost always worked well together, and today was no exception. As soon as they were able to position the ambulance, they both hopped out and ran to the crowd that was surrounding the accident victim, who was writhing in pain on the ground. "Step back!" Gia yelled, and a few people moved away from the crowd that circled around the victim. This was when Gia appreciated having a big, deep-voiced man as a partner. Dustin yelled, "Get back! Get back!" Instantly, the crowd parted and moved away from the man on the ground, giving Gia her first look at the injury. The man was on the ground, which worried Gia instantly, because it meant that he could have worsened a neck or spinal injury by moving from his seat. But the thing that she had to pay attention to immediately was the blood. He was covered in blood, especially his face. "I think we have a broken nose," she said to Dustin. "Get his vitals." Her voice had taken a tone of authority, and Dustin followed her lead, reacting to her calm leadership. I'll try to stop the bleeding, she said. She scanned the man's face, trying to find the source of the bleeding. She thought it was probably a broken nose, but it was difficult to see because the man was holding his face, refusing to move his hands and screaming louder if Gia tried to move them. Gia spoke calmly to the patient. We're here to help you. Can you tell me your name? The garbled moan that came out couldn't be understood. Do you have any allergies to medications? She asked. Again, there was no understanding the answer. She couldn't expect any information from him. Vitals are good, Dustin said as he finished checking. Let's get him on the board, she told Justin. Get his arms secured. Instantly, Dustin ran for the board, while Gia tried again to calm the patient. The man moaned, his hands still cupped over his nose. You're going to be okay, she told him. We're taking you to the hospital. When they had gotten his hands secured to the board, she was able to see the injury. It was definitely a broken nose. She could see the bones skewed to the side, and the blood was pouring out in pulsing rhythms. She placed her gloved hands firmly over the nose, applying pressure to the bridge, which instantly slowed the blood loss. Let's get him transported, she told Justin, and together they lifted the board up and onto the stretcher, then into the back of the ambulance. Gia held the pressure on his nose the entire way back to the hospital. When they arrived, the emergency nurse met them and instantly took over. Leading the team was Morgan, Gia's good friend. She was short and blonde, with sparkling blue eyes. Gia knew her as fun, bubbly, and relaxed, but here she was in her element, so controlled and in charge that she appeared taller. Any allergies? Morgan asked. He couldn't answer, Gia said. Morgan nodded, leading the rest of the nurses down the hall as they wheeled the man into the room, leaving Gia and Dustin standing in the hall. Can we take a break? He asked. I need a soda. Keep on the radio, Gia told him. I'll go see how this guy's doing, and you can find me if we get dispatched. Thanks, Dustin said, checking that his radio was on, and then heading towards the vending machines. Gia walked down the hall and found the room where the man they'd just brought was being treated. She watched as Morgan administered medicine to stop the bleeding. The man was already calm, lying with his eyes closed, so Gia assumed they'd already gotten him something for the pain. Morgan gave some orders to the nurse in the room and then walked out into the hall to talk to Gia. He's okay, she said. I don't think there's any internal injuries. It just looks like the airbag broke his nose. The doctor's getting scans once we've stopped the bleeding to check for whiplash. Okay, that's what I thought you'd tell us. I'm glad he seems all right. Morgan nodded. Hey, did you hear about the layoff? No. What? Well, Morgan's voice was lowered. They cut a bunch of nursing staff. I heard actually that the ambulance services department was going to take some cuts too. Why? We're already understaffed. Profits. Sue in accounting told me there's too much overhead, Morgan said. Damn it. Do you think I'll lose my job? Morgan scoffed. You? No. The place would literally fall down without you. As if on cue, Dustin was jogging down the hall towards them. Gia noticed a spark in Morgan's eye as he drew close. Does she have a crush on my partner? Gia, we have to go, Dustin said. There's a call. Gia didn't say goodbye to Morgan, just ran down the hall at full speed towards the ambulance. Moments later, she and Dustin were side by side in the ambulance, rushing towards their call. It's at a restaurant, he told her. Choking? She asked. Not sure. The dispatcher said he's unconscious. Oh, well. Our day's almost over, Dustin. Hang in there. This is going to be our last call. He nodded. She could sense that he was tired, despite the quick burst of sugar and caffeine from his soda. They were working too hard. When they arrived at the restaurant, she instantly recognized the name of the place. It wasn't a place she could afford to go, but she knew that it had the reputation as the best food in town. Nice, Dustin said. We can grab dinner to go. Gia rolled her eyes at him. Let's go. Inside, the ritzy environment seemed eerie. It was completely silent, and instead of people smiling at tables and waiters rushing back and forth, everyone was crowded in a large group, murmuring. It was so quiet that Gia was certain they were going to be transporting someone who was already beyond saving. Paramedics here! Dustin yelled, cutting through the silence. But as the crowd cleared, Gia gained hope. There was a man lying still on the floor, and he did appear to be unconscious. But what gave her hope was a man doing CPR. Perfectly timed chest compressions and rescue breaths. He looked like he knew what he was doing, so Gia instantly assumed he was a doctor or a nurse, or even a paramedic. She needed to take over from him, but first she asked the crowd to tell her what happened. "He's my husband," a sobbing woman said, stepping forward. "He said his chest hurt and then he just fell on the ground. I yelled and this man jumped up and started giving him CPR." She pointed at the broad, muscular back of the man who was still bent over her husband. Gia turned to Dustin. "Go get the EKG and get ready for a transport. Sounds like a heart attack." Dustin nodded, and Gia knelt down next to the patient. The man was doing compressions, so Gia prepared the bag valve mask for the next rescue breath. As the man did his compressions, he was so absorbed in what he was doing that he didn't even notice Gia working until it was time to give the rescue breath. He leaned over and then looked up, shocked. When their eyes met, she got a shock of her own for a moment. His eyes were crystal blue and gorgeous. The look in them was relieved and seemed to say, "You're here." "Squeeze," she said, showing him how, "when I say go." She ignored the hard flutter of her heart that had started the moment their eyes met. The man nodded, and Gia took over the compressions. This had all happened so fast that they hadn't missed a beat, forcing the man's heart to continue pumping in rhythm. Gia couldn't have done it so smoothly without help. She fell into the super-focused rhythm of chest compressions, down and up, but somewhere in the back of her mind lurked the man's intense gaze, the deep blue of his eyes. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see him, poised and ready for her to give him the order to squeeze the bag. It was time. She rose up slightly, keeping her hands in position on the patient's chest. "Squeeze," she told him. She watched as he gave the man a rescue breath with the mask, observing the rise and fall of the chest. "Good," she said quickly before resuming compressions. Dustin arrived as she was counting out the rhythm with the EKG. "Definitely a heart attack," he said after the machine was finished with the reading. "We're so close to the hospital, we just need to get him in there. No time to defibrillate," she said. "Get him on the board." Dustin snapped into action, shifting the man onto the transport board while the mystery man did another squeeze on the bag. Gia made everyone in the crowd gasp as she climbed onto the stretcher with the man, not missing a beat in the chest compressions as Dustin wheeled them into the ambulance. It was time for a rescue breath as they were loading him. Gia said, "Squeeze," again, and the man did. He's so reliable, so calm. He has to be a paramedic or a doctor. She looked at him quickly, and her eyes landed on bulging arm muscles that pushed against the fabric of a white button-up shirt. She went back to doing compressions, waiting for Dustin to close the doors. Then she realized their mystery helper had climbed into the ambulance, his hands still on the bag. "You can't come with us," Dustin said to him. "You'll have to follow behind with the wife." "I'm squeezing the bag," she heard the man respond. His voice was calm, authoritative, and somehow sexual. She couldn't lose count of her compressions. "Squeeze!" she yelled. The man squeezed the bag. She caught her breath and said, "Dustin, we don't have time to argue. Let him come. If anyone's going to get in trouble, it will be me, not you. Let's go." She started compressing the patient's chest again without saying anything more. Dustin didn't put up an argument. He just slammed the back door, climbed into the ambulance, and started to drive. CPR was easier in this closed environment, with no distractions and gawkers. Gia suddenly realized she could smell the man who was helping her. He was wearing some kind of cologne that smelled like the ocean. She breathed deep, forcing herself to keep count. When it was his turn to squeeze the bag, she looked up for a moment. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair. The deep voice matched the slightly rugged exterior. His face was devastatingly handsome. Strong features, and those shining blue eyes were so luminous with his dark hair and olive skin. Those were the only details she was able to absorb in the quick glance she'd taken. And then it was her turn to work. She pushed her locked arms straight up and down, forcing the heart not to give out. 1 minute, Dustin called out, and she knew that she would only have to do one more set of compressions before they arrived. Squeeze, she said, but she realized now that she didn't have to say it. This man, whoever he was, had picked up her rhythm and was working with her as if they could read each other's minds. She caught her breath again as she stole another glance. His body was in incredible shape. She could see the shape of his muscles through his suit, bulging arms and chest rounding out the fabric. He was incredibly well dressed, in a suit that looked like it cost more than Gia spent on rent in a month. His face was calm and confident, but extremely focused. A vision flashed through her mind of his arms around her, pushing her up against the wall of the ambulance as his hungry lips fell on hers. She mentally pushed it away. He's hot, whoever he is. Not to mention brave to jump and save someone. Who is he? As she did the last set of compressions before they got to the hospital, the man began to speak to her. His voice was so confident, so deep and controlled, that it actually helped her to stay in time with her compressions rather than distract her. You're doing an amazing job, he said. It's impressive to watch. I could watch you all day. She refused to let that last comment distract her, but it wasn't easy. She wanted badly to turn and look at him, to let those blue eyes burn into her again, but she couldn't. She had to focus. The job comes first, she reminded herself. It always comes first. She kept compressing in rhythm. When they arrived at the hospital, the nursing staff took over instantly. Morgan was there, shouting out orders and taking control of the situation. Soon, the 2 EMTs and the mystery man were left alone in the hall, following more slowly behind the rushing medical team. Every cell in Gia's body was aware of the presence of the man as he walked slightly behind her down the hall. When they came to the room where the man was being treated, they could see that he was being defibrillated. They watched as 2 shocks were administered, which were able to kickstart his heart. He had a steady rhythm within moments, and the doctor stepped out of the room, removing his gloves. Morgan was behind him, following him out into the hall. I'd like to shake a hero's hand, the doctor said. The ambulance dispatch told us you kept him alive. The doctor and the mystery man shook hands. Thank you, doctor, but these 2 are the real heroes, he said, waving his hand towards Gia and Dustin. She caught his eye as he looked towards her, and felt an instant spark as the deep crystal blue bored into her. Her heart pounded fiercely. And humble, too. Well, good job, rescue team, the doctor said. I think he'll make it. The doctor walked away. Gia almost gathered enough courage to ask the mystery man for his name, but Morgan spoke first. I need to ask you some questions, Gia, she said, for the chart. Gia nodded and followed Morgan back into the room with the patient. She knew that she may have just missed her chance with the mystery man, and she sighed. Morgan thought that she was upset about the patient. What's wrong? He's going to make it. He'll be okay. We're going to let his wife in the room soon, Morgan said. That's great. Morgan asked Gia some questions about how many compressions they did, how long the transport took, and what time the EKG was done, and wrote the answers in the man's chart. Do you know how long CPR was done before you got there? I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask the hero. Gia wished she knew his name. I can't believe how humble he is, Morgan said. I mean, if I were him, I don't know if I'd still be that nice, you know? I'd probably be bossy and mean in his shoes. What do you mean? Morgan looked up from her chart and blinked. You don't know who he is? The man who saved your patient? No. How do you know who he is? Gia asked, surprised. Morgan looked at Gia with wide eyes. You really don't know? Gia shrugged. I really don't. Morgan smiled. She loved being the one to give a good piece of gossip. He's David Teller. Gia had never heard the name. I can't believe you've never heard of him. David Teller is probably one of the richest men in the nation. He owns Realize Inc. Have you heard of that? Some of this was starting to ring a bell for Gia. She never watched the news and was too busy to read newspapers. But she had heard Dustin talking before about Realize. Is that the business that buys other businesses that are failing and then fixes them so they make profit? She asked. Exactly. He's a business genius, Morgan said. I really thought he was a doctor. I wonder why he's so good at CPR. Morgan shrugged. That's all you have to say? You really think about work too much, Gia. Actually, isn't your shift over? Go home. Gia rolled her eyes and left. Morgan was always telling her to go home, but no one worked longer hours than she did. Gia changed quickly into her street clothes in the women's locker room. She stopped to look in the mirror, taking her hair out of the bun it had been in. She let it fall around her shoulders. Its dark brown waves settled loosely. She wasn't wearing makeup, because she hardly ever did while working. I'm crazy to think there was a spark between us. He's a billionaire who could be a male model. He could have anyone. She sighed and left the locker room, carrying her uniform in a duffel bag. She passed Dustin on the way out and waved goodbye as she headed out the door. She felt bad for him. He was exhausted. She felt energized, as she always did at the end of a shift. She usually ended up going home and staying wide awake for hours, trying to work the adrenaline out of her system somehow. She rounded the corner towards the exit and sucked in her breath sharply. There, in the hard plastic chairs of the waiting area, was the man. David Teller. She forced herself to start breathing again, resuming her progress towards the front door. Her heart pounded as she wondered if she should talk to him or walk past. He was looking down at his clasped hands, the same focused look she'd seen on his face when they were working together to keep the patient alive. Every step that brought her closer to him made her sure that she shouldn't talk to him. But then he looked up, and his eyes scanned her body from her shoes up over her legs, her belly, her breasts, and her face. When their eyes met, her heart skipped a beat because she saw something unbelievable, but completely unmistakable. It was the spark of attraction. He wanted her. She stopped in her tracks just a few feet away from him. He stood up, taking a step to close the distance between them, and held out his hand. I'm David, he said. We didn't have a chance to talk. I'm Gia. She took his hand. It was warm, surprisingly soft, but she could feel an intense strength lurking beneath the surface of the smooth skin. The smell toyed with her again, the ocean. His intense blue eyes were hard to look at, especially with that spark that she couldn't deny, desire. She lowered her eyes for a moment, focusing on his chest, the hard muscles against the white fabric. Gia. His deep, strong voice caressed the name as he released her hand. I meant what I said, you know. You did an amazing job. It's incredible to watch you. Thank you, she said. So how do you know CPR? He smiled. I require my employees to take the class, so our office is safe, and I never make my employees do anything that I can't do. Well, you saved a stranger today. You should be proud. And you save strangers every day, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. You look different with your hair down. Softer. His hand went to the hair that curled around her shoulder, touching it gently. Her heart did a flip-flop, and she had to look away from him. This time her eyes focused on his arms, the strong, athletic biceps. Oh my God. She sputtered. She realized suddenly that she was still in the hospital, off duty, but still at her work. Did the nurses tell you he's going to be fine? He's stable. You really should go home, get some rest. You can visit him tomorrow to see how he's doing. David's hand didn't move from her hair, stroking gently so that his fingers grazed her neck. I should go home, he agreed, his eyes sparkling at her again. The look combined with the fingers just barely touching her skin made her knees quiver. But I rode here in an ambulance, remember? I called my driver and he's stuck in traffic. I could give you a ride home, Gia offered. The words were out of her mouth before she even had time to think about them, to think about what it meant to be in a car alone with him, driving to his house. As soon as she said them, she knew it was wrong, not appropriate. She wanted to take it back. But it was too late. He smiled at her, and she felt a distinct melting feeling inside, like he could turn her into a puddle with one look. That's a good idea, he said. He pulled a phone out of his pocket. Travis, he said after dialing. Don't worry about coming to get me. I have a ride. Take the night off. There was something about the way he said, take the night off, that made Gia's hands shaky. Lead the way, he said, waving his arms towards the door. Gia walked, her body aware of him behind her, as she led him to her car. What am I doing? This is me, she said, indicating her car. They got in and she turned the ignition, her hands still shaking. He gave her directions as she pulled out of the parking lot. He lived about 20 minutes away, she realized, wondering what they could talk about for that long. You are really good at what you do, he said, that same rich confidence in his voice drawing her in. Suddenly, she wanted to hear about him. She wanted to know everything about him. Thank you. I love my job. I live for it, she said, kicking herself for saying something so awkward. But you must have other interests, he said. A boyfriend? No, she said. She turned to him quickly, taking in his expression. He was being serious, and he seemed happy that she didn't have a boyfriend. I don't really have time most weeks, she added, her voice shaking slightly. He asked her how many hours she worked every week. She told him it was usually 60. He nodded. That's too much. She didn't argue. David seemed like the sort of man who won every argument. But I'm glad you don't have a boyfriend, he said after a long pause. Why? Because I plan to seduce you, Gia. She looked at him. His face was serious, his eyes sparkling with that same desire. Watch the road, he reminded her gently. She swallowed hard and turned back to driving. I'm sorry to shock you, but I know what I want, and I think I know what you want. I've always been attracted to strong women like you, but you're the first one I've ever met that made me feel like this, he said. Gia didn't say anything. Her throat had gone dry. He wants to seduce me. It was all she could do to drive. My exit is coming up, he said, and the rest of the drive, they didn't say another word to each other outside of his directions to get to his house. "This is it," he said finally. "Pull into the drive." There was something about the way he ordered her like that. It made a tingle run up her back. His confident voice, so deep, intimidating. She felt a tingle between her legs as they drew closer to his house. Is he going to ask me in? Am I going to say yes? It was as if her brain had shut partly down. She couldn't make up her mind. The house was incredible, with an outer gate that led into a courtyard. The lights were glowing into the night, and it looked inviting and warm. She thought of her own empty apartment, the sink that still held the breakfast dishes she hadn't had time to do, the hours of being alone until she could finally fall asleep. "You can park here, just in front of the porch," he said. She put the car in park, but left it running. He turned to her, undoing his seatbelt. His eyes were more intense than ever, burning into her. "Will you come in?" 4 words held such turmoil for Gia. She didn't know what to say. "Are you seducing me?" she asked. He smiled. "Not yet." Then he leaned over the center console of the car, his hand moving to her arm, trailing up slowly until she shuddered. Then he put it on the back of her neck, drawing her face to his. His breath was minty as he kissed her. She felt the melting again, her body moving towards him, the console between them, and her seatbelt holding her back when she really wanted to feel his body pressed hard against hers. His tongue flicked her lips, moving past them and into her mouth to stroke her tongue. The kiss took everything from her, all thought, all resistance. He pulled back, leaving her red-lipped and wide-eyed looking at him. "Now I'm seducing you," he said. "Come inside." The tingle started in her legs again as he said come inside like that. It was a request, but it was also an order. His deep voice challenging her and drawing her in. She felt a fear mingled with excitement. Both emotions fighting each other, neither one quite winning out. Her body throbbed with it, unsure if it faced a threat or an opportunity. "Yes," she said, again speaking before she thought. David instantly climbed out of the car, pushing the door open. Gia sat stunned for a moment as he came around the driver's side and opened the door, holding his hand out for her. She took it. "What the hell am I doing?" Walking towards the door, her feet crunched on gravel and stepped behind his. He led her, his hand on hers, not letting go. Her breath came in fast bursts as he turned the key and pushed the door open. The smell of dinner cooking streamed out like magic. "I have a housekeeper," he explained. "She'll be gone by now." David led Gia into the kitchen where the oven displayed warm. He walked over and looked inside. "Chicken," he said. "Are you hungry?" "Not yet," she said. "I eat dinner late." "Can I offer you a drink? I have wine." "No, thank you. I don't drink." "Tea, then?" he suggested. She agreed that tea sounded perfect, and he went about getting it going. Meanwhile, she looked around the kitchen, taking in the size of it first, and then marveling at how beautiful everything was. Everything was there to serve a function, but every single piece was so well designed, it was as if it was a piece of art. The espresso machine, the toaster, even the refrigerator. Everything was the best money could buy. She began to feel more nervous than she had since the moment she told him she would drive him home. "This is crazy. I can't do this. I'm just going to have some tea and go." When he turned holding a small cup of tea out for her, she instantly felt that same melting sensation returning, along with the tingle between her legs. She took the cup and sipped the warm liquid while he picked up his own cup. You don't do this very often, do you? Drink tea? She made an attempt at being funny, but her voice was shaking. He smiled. No, I mean, you don't usually go home with men. I don't, to be honest. I'm usually so wrapped up in work that I never think about it, doing things like this. You shouldn't be working like that, he said. You're amazing at your job, but we all work better when we have time off to recharge. Being overworked isn't good for anyone. Well, she said, that's the job. It's the line of work. There's nothing to do about it. He gave her a sly smile, as if he had a plan, but she had no time to think about it. He put his cup down and took hers out of her hand, placing it on the countertop. She took a step back until she was pressed against the counter, the edge of it pushing against her lower back. Maybe there's something we could do about it, he said, closing the distance between them with a step. His body pressed hard against hers, and she could feel another hardness in his pants. It pulsed, and her body responded, her hips grinding into his involuntarily. Her body was taking over, leaving behind any hesitation, any thought at all. The only thing that mattered was the sensation of his hard frame pressing against hers, his will controlling her, forcing her to comply with his demands through pure sexual persuasion. His lips came down hard on hers, in a bruising strength that made her knees go weak. She felt his strong arms supporting her, pulling her hips hard to his, and she felt another pulse as he grew harder. Her hands moved to the buttons of his white shirt, undoing them one at a time as she struggled to control her breathing. She wanted him, his body against hers, his scent on her skin. Mostly she wanted to find out what would happen if she just let go. David shrugged his shirt off. He was wearing a thin cotton undershirt, and it revealed every ripple of his hard abdomen. Gia sighed as she looked at him, a long exhale escaping from her parted lips. His hands moved over her body to the hem of her top, a simple V-neck t-shirt. He peeled it off slowly, moving it up and over her skin in one smooth motion. It landed on the saltillo tile floor. His eyes moved hungrily over her body, devouring her breasts as they spilled heavily over the cups of her bra. You're stunning, he said, and his voice was rich and deep, full of intensity. I want to fuck you right here on the counter. Oh, God, she moaned. This is really happening. His body pressed harder against her, and she could feel his shaft, fully hard through the fabric of his pants. His hands moved to her neck, stroking slowly downward, tickling her skin with torturous softness. Shivers ran down her spine as his fingers trailed down her chest, circling her breasts, trailing slowly just under them until he reached her upper back. Her bra clasp was quickly undone, and straps falling over her smooth shoulders. He pulled it away from her body and tossed it aside. He moved his hands to her breasts, covering them with his fingers and squeezing intensely until she moaned. Yes, he said, his voice low and deep with an edge that made it seem animalistic. You're ready for me. His hands wasted no time pushing her pants down over her rounded hips and butt, past her thighs until they fell to the ground. She kicked out of her shoes and stepped out the jeans, standing before him in just her panties, which were pink cotton. He stood back for a moment, taking in her form. I like your panties, he said, that same low growl in his voice, turning her on, making her wet. "Take them off." She complied instantly, something in the tone of his voice making it clear that obeying him was part of this experience. Her heart pounded as she realized that she would probably obey him in anything. He could make her do anything with just a word of that sexy, demanding voice. Gia's panties joined the rest of the discarded clothes, leaving nothing hidden. David's eyes scanned her body slowly. He didn't say anything, and he didn't need to. The pure attraction in his eyes said it all. She shivered under his heavy gaze. His hands moved his own pants, and soon he was just as exposed as she was. She took in his hard body, the ripples of his abs, and the bulges of his chest, and the rounded biceps of corded muscle on his arm. She caught her breath as her gaze moved down and took in his completely hard, intimidating shaft. "Tell me you want this," he said. Again, the deep animalism of his voice left no room for argument. "I want it," she said, her voice betraying her longing. He moved towards her with the calculated slowness of a jungle predator and put his strong hands on her hips. A tingle shot through her body as he touched her. She sat at a perfect height for his entry if he stood on his toes. He rose up, bringing the tip of his shaft to her wet opening. She felt her body pulsing in response, muscle spasms that anticipated his entrance, as if she were already squeezing tighter around him. She was soaking wet for him, had been since before he pushed her against the countertop. He let out a long exhale as he slowly slipped himself inside, stretching her nearly to the point of pain. Her head tilted back automatically as she took his hugeness into her. "Yes," he moaned. "Take it." She took him to the hilt, relaxing herself so that he could slip inside more easily. When he began to thrust in and out, he started slowly, with no force. But as she became accustomed to his girth, he started to fuck her hard, moving his cock deep inside. Each thrust became harder, more intense. He grunted with the effort and growled in her ear, "Yes, take it, take it." Moans escaped Gia's lips at the climax of every thrust as she moved closer to orgasm. "We're moving," he said abruptly, the rhythm of his pace unchanged. "Wrap your arms around my neck and hold on." Without pulling his hard cock from her throbbing pussy, he lifted her from the counter. She wrapped her legs around his waist, holding tight as he walked, still inside her to the living room. With each step, the small shift of his position inside her was a tantalizing tickle that brought her dangerously close to orgasm halfway through the move. When he laid her down on the couch, he used his strong arms to hold them together so that his cock did never budge from inside her tightness. She couldn't help but let out a laugh at the outrageousness of what they'd just done, moving from the kitchen to the living room mid-sex without skipping a beat. He smiled slyly as she let out an uncontainable giggle, but then became serious again as he slowly resumed his pace. He didn't start again at the hard and fast thrust that he'd been punishing her with on the counter. Instead, he began slowly, getting her used to the new position, making sure she was wet and ready before he started to fuck her hard again. And when he did fuck her, it was even harder and deeper than before, without the restraints of the awkward standing position he'd had when he was fucking her on the counter. His cock went deep into her, and her body responded. She gasped at first and quickly adjusted, squeezing her pussy uncontrollably to increase the stretch of each thrust. "Yes," he growled as he moved harder into her. Her breath began to come in hard bursts, making it uncontrollable, high-pitched ah, ah sounds as his cock went deep inside her. His shaft stroked her G-spot each time he pulled it out, and he began to slow that part of his thrust, drawing out the pressure on her most sensitive spot. Gia tilted her hips towards his until his hard body rubbed against her clit, intensifying the sensation. She met his thrust, perfecting his intense contact with her body so that each wave of pleasure stretched out, harder and longer. It was the most intense sexual pleasure she'd ever felt. Her mind was dissolved into millions of pieces, unable to think farther than the pleasure that was pulsing in her body along with her heartbeat. It had become desperate climb, both of them forcing harder and harder into each other as orgasm grew closer. Nothing in her experience would have made her believe that it could feel any more intense than it already did. But it could. Davel trailed his hands slowly up Gia's hip and over the curve of her waist, up until he reached her breast. His fingertips tickled along the sensitive skin until they reached her nipple. His thrust never slowed or softened as he began to roll her nipple between his fingertips. When he pinched, it was hard and shocking, timed perfectly with the most intense stretch of the thrust. "Ow!" she moaned at the intensity of the sensation. Instinctively, she brought her hand to his, pulling him away from her breast to stop the shocks of pain as he pinched. "No," he said, that sexy growl in his voice sending a rush of moisture to her pussy. He pinched again. "Just feel it." She relaxed in her body, feeling the hard pinch on her nipples shooting pain down into her belly at the moment his hard shaft was buried to its ultimate depth inside her. The pain was followed by intense pleasure as he pulled out, stroking her G-spot. It was almost too much to bear. Gia was surprised and shocked as she realized that she was enjoying the pinch. She liked the pain as it rushed down to meet the pleasure pulsing up from her clit. Two waves of intense sensation coursed through her body, eliminating everything around her. They were so close it was almost as if she couldn't distinguish David's body from hers. Meeting each other thrust for thrust, but he still led her, as if pulling her with a magnet, showing her the way to a pleasure she'd never even known existed. As he brought her closer to orgasm, the pinching on her nipple intensified. She groaned, relaxing into the pain, even as pleasure coursed through her body to counteract it. Soon the pain became another form of pleasure, a more intense pleasure that took her breath away. Just as she felt she had accustomed herself and was taking the pain easily, he began to pull her hair. His hand moved slowly up, stroking her hair gently for several strokes. He never lost rhythm of his thrust as he wove his fingers against her scalp, taking a handful of hair firmly in his fist. He pulled just enough that she was unable to move her head from side to side, and made intense eye contact with her as he thrust hard and punished her nipple. There was nothing she could do but stare deeply into his eyes as he fucked her. His gaze was intense, and she knew that he was now working hard to come inside her. She moaned, tilting her hips upward, feeling the hard pull of his body against her clit. She was stretched all around his huge shaft, her nipple throbbing in time. "Yes," he groaned. "I want to feel you come around me hard." His words and his deep voice turned her on even more than his fingers holding her head in place and pinching her nipples hard. She felt an intense throbbing that started deep within her and pulsed to her clit, moving from her sex in waves throughout her body. She was coming, almost as if responding to his words automatically. It was almost as if being ordered to orgasm on cue made it hotter somehow. and she came for him, the tightness of her pussy intensifying as it throbbed hard around his shaft, squeezing until he groaned. "Oh, fuck yes," he said, moaning.